How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final genocide. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in dystopia. This is the final
And lastly, we ask that there be no recording or streaming of today's sessions from the floor. And any disruptive behavior in today's session will result in being removed from the call.
We please ask that there will be no recording or streaming of today's sessions from the floor. Any disruptive behavior today could result in being removed from the call. So, just be a nice person. So with the little housekeeping things out of the way, let's jump right in.
Again, we ask no recording or streaming of today's session.
We ask that there be no recording or streaming of today's session from the floor. Any disruptive behavior in today's session will result in being removed from the call.
Won't anybody help us? What are we running for? When there's nowhere we can run to anymore. Can't afford to be innocent. Stand up and face the enemy. It's a do or die situation. We will be invincible. And with the power of conviction, there is no sacrifice. It's a do or die situation. We will be invincible.
Who the fuck is Karlyn? She's just some sweet lady. She's like in a knitting. She does like a knitting stream. She's like a knitting YouTuber. She does knitting.
Can we grow up a little bit and
Alt
not
Girl
be
sent $200.
retarded?
Have you
Please.
seen the work of Karlyn Borysenko? Anti-commie cult leader and is obsessed with looking at what actual far-left communists are talking about and organizing today, infiltrating them. They infiltrated the universities, schools, media. She has the receipts to back it up. Primary source evidence. Infestation is dire and she calls Republicans idiots eating slop. Agree.
Thank you for the big super chat. Yeah, oh, I know Karlyn B. She's solid. She's funny. I
The
like
great
her.
noticer sent $200.
Literally. So
Not
it's,
Ian.
it's not because
Yeah.
I haven't dangled my junk into the combat zone on purpose to get some camera footage, but that's the big part of what's the
Is
problem.
that what you call reporters?
Go
and live
under, if
streaming?
you're going to do it,
Yeah,
go
seriously.
undercover. Otherwise you're wearing a hunk of meat in a lion's den. Nick Shirley, I love you. Take care of yourself, man. Karlyn Borysenko went undercover. Do stuff like that. Like if you want to expose this thing, don't pariah, please.
But Ian, here's and I agree with you to an extent.
What up? What up? What up? What up? What up, everyone? Hey, is it Wednesday? I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday, right? My husband has the day off today, so I think it's Wednesday. I think that's like a regular weekly thing. You know, my husband's only had this new job selling cars for a couple months. I'm finally learning his schedule. Finally learning the schedule. So it must be Wednesday, right? My week is all messed up because of travel this past weekend. It's like my internal clock is off. I don't even know what time it is. I don't even know what day it is. It's Wednesday. Reagan is sick. I'm sorry you're sick, Reagan. But she's still here. See, that's dedication. It's dedication to be sick and still come to the stream, especially when you watch as much of my stuff as Reagan does, because she knows all this shit. She doesn't even have to learn anymore. Like Reagan is like she still shows up to class because she wants to, because she knows that if she comes to class, she's going to see stuff she's not going to see anywhere else, which is really, really cool. Listen, I was thinking last night, I was like, literally for the amount of times that I have been accused of only engaging in drama, do you guys know how many people on Twitter have told me with absolute confidence, Karlyn, you only make drama content, you only make drama content, you only make drama content, you only make drama, like over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, I don't know what content you're watching, man, but I cover the far left. Like the vast majority of content that I make is about the far left. And I was, I was thinking about it last night because everyone is obsessed with Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and all of the things that they're saying on Twitter. And it's just like everyone and their mother is just obsessed with this. And Tim Pool is getting in on the drama, and everyone is covering either Candace Owens or Ian Carroll or Tim Pool. And that's all anyone's talking about. And I'm just like, I don't care. I could not care less. I could not listen. I'm sure it's very entertaining. I really am. I'm sure it's entertaining. There is a small little part of me that does want to go back and watch Candace Owens. Just I was even thinking about this. I was like, should I just do a binge stream of all of Candace Owens content for like the last, I don't know, month or so? Because it really seems to have like fallen off a cliff. Like, should I just like sit down Netflix style and not leave and just knit like all day and just watch Candace Owens content? Is that actually what I should be doing? And I gotta say though, like, I just don't care. I could not care less about any of this stuff. So I think I might be one of the only content creators on the internet right now that is not going to make content talking about Candace Owens and Tim Pool and Ian Carroll and Tucker Carlson and all of that stuff. And listen, whatever. I don't care what people make content about, but like, can we please talk about something that matters? Like people seem to like the GOP is trying to set up, because the GOP knows they're going to lose the midterms, right? The conservatives have figured out expertly that they're going to lose the midterms. And so now they're just trying to do everything they can to blame the midterm loss that is absolutely going to happen on Candace Owens. Yeah, it's all Candace Owens' fault that you guys lost the midterms. It's all Candace Owens' fault that Trump controls the presidency, the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court. And you're telling me that it is Candace Owens' fault that the Republicans are going to lose the midterms? Really? Is this how far we have sunk, conservatives? I mean, but the answer, of course, is yes, because the conservative platform is whatever is going viral on Twitter on any given day. And it's just like, you want to know why, Republicans? You want to know why? You want to know why you're going to lose the midterms? Because you have no vision for the country, because the only good thing that Trump has actually executed on in the last year is no taxes on tips. We've got no mass deportations. It's anti-Semitism all the fucking time. I am so fucking sick of hearing about anti-Semitism. Everyone else is sick of it too, by the way. That is why Nick Fuentes is as popular as he is. It's not because of foreign bots. It's not because of Qatar. It's not because of any of these things. It's because people are fucking tired of hearing about anti-Semitism all the effing time. But that's all Trump wants to talk about, and that's all the GOP wants to talk about, and that's all the administration wants to talk about. They said they were going to do something about Antifa. They did these fake executive orders that didn't actually mean anything, which means they didn't do anything about Antifa. Antifa proceeded to Antifa proceeded to kick the Trump administration out of Chicago, basically. They abandoned Chicago. They abandoned doing mass deportations entirely in Chicago because of Antifa. Even though they're declared a domestic terrorist organization, they're still not being fucking arrested. There's still stuff going on in Portland. There's stuff going on in Los Angeles. There's stuff going on in North Carolina. The anti-ICE protests are only getting bigger and bigger. And by the way, the left is actually getting more organized and more coordinated with the anti-ICE protests, and they're doubling down on all that stuff. And so it's only going to get worse. The anti-ICE protests are not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And we know who's doing it. And allegedly, I was to understand that Antifa was a terrorist organization, and Trump still isn't fucking arresting them. So you want to know why, GOP? You want to know why you're going to lose the fucking midterms? Because you haven't done anything that people care about, and you just whine and complain about anti-Semitism all the fucking time. It's not because of Candace Owens. Has nothing to do with Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a manifestation of the insanity of the conservative right. And if you guys can't figure out a way to successfully mitigate the impact of a fucking podcaster that's running a podcast out of her house with a very minimal producing team, if you fucking geniuses in the GOP can't figure out a way to mitigate this, it is your fucking fault. They have hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal. Hundreds of millions of dollars could be being put in to solving any number of problems, or at least putting together a much better PR campaign than what they're doing. But no. We have to hear about anti-Semitism all the time and Candace Owens all the time, and no one pays attention to anything that matters, and that is why the world is stupid. That's why the world is stupid. Everything is stupid. But you know what? I have to give Laura Lee a little bit of credit. Because I asked on Twitter, I was like, guys, should I be talking about Candace Owens? Should I just embrace the suck and talk about Candace Owens? And I gotta give Laura Lee here some credit. Laura Lee said, I think your take on the matter would be really funny, but we shouldn't focus on things that make us stupid. Yeah. Actually, yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. We should not be focusing on things that make us stupid. That's wisdom right there. That's wisdom. I can't deal with this bullshit. I am like, listen, like being smart, I think, is a curse. And I think that I have a very smart audience. I think I have a very high IQ audience. I have purposefully cultivated a beautiful sanctuary on the internet where I have an high IQ audience. But I sometimes think being a high IQ person is a curse, because you know exactly how stupid the world is and how stupid the obsessions with all the things that don't matter are. And it's like, we just have to make the choice to not engage with the stupid. I mean, every once in a while you can dabble for fun. Okay, whatever. Everyone needs a break. It's like smart people who watch soap operas, or it's like smart people who engage in tabloid gossip. We all need a break sometimes, guys. We can't be smart like 100% of the time. But like, if we can focus on being smart, like, I don't know, like 90 to 95% of the time, I think we're going to be in a much better place. And we should not be focusing our energy and attention on things that make us stupid. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do something else on today's stream. We are gonna watch content that has literally, I'm not exaggerating when I say the content that we are watching today has never been seen by anyone. Because I did a search today. I just searched today on YouTube. I was looking for content. I wanted to see what new content has popped up around queer liberation and trans liberation and all that stuff, because of course I am personally always on a queer Marxism kick. Queer Marxism is an odd fascination that I have because it is the most dystopian of leftist ideologies. Thanks, Laura Lee. Appreciate it. Appreciate your wisdom over on Twitter. Yes, we have found the magical no views. Yeah. Yeah. So I searched for trans liberation today on YouTube. And it's like, this is like, it's magic. It's fucking magic. 3 hours ago, this video by the Tempest Collective, which is a radical collective of revolutionary socialists and communists. They're all over the country, but they've particularly been very active in Vermont this year. Vermont has very, very active Tempest Collective. We've watched several videos from the Tempest Collective. 3 hours ago, the Tempest Collective, via this public access YouTube channel in Vermont, uploaded the video Resisting Transphobia, the Struggle for Trans Rights and Liberation Today. And as you can see, it literally has 0 views. So when I say that no one has seen the content that I'm going to show you on the channel today, it's because literally no one has seen the content I'm going to show you on the channel today. Because that's what happens when you know how to look for content. That's what happens when you know the right keywords. That's what happens when you follow the right YouTube channels. That's what happens when you know who the real activists are, how to distinguish between the real activists and social media clickbait content, which apparently I'm like the only person on the internet that knows how to do. Like obviously my audience knows how to do this too. People are picking up on it. But this is the type of stuff I love. I love finding that piece of content that literally no one has seen before and just like enjoying every minute of it. And you know this is going to be good. We have watched the Tempest Collective many times on this channel. The Tempest Collective never, ever, 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 ever disappoints. They always come through with golden nuggets. You will hear some crazy shit today. I promise you. I absolutely promise you. But we got something else to do before we do that. We got another thing to do. Does everyone remember, when was this? Like a month ago? Does everyone remember about a month ago when I was the only person on the internet to cover the Be Queer, Do Terrorism manifesto? Does everyone remember this? Does everyone remember when a group of radical militant queer anarchists literally released an entire manifesto about being queer and doing terrorism, and I was the only person on the internet who said, maybe we should be talking about this? We have a group of radical anarchists talking about doing terrorism. Does anyone want to cover this? Does anyone on the internet want to talk about this? Well, no, of course they didn't. No, of course they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to tell their audiences that I mean, literally, you can read the whole manifesto on the website. I have it all broken down here. Literally, it says be queer, do terrorism. And the whole thing is literally a justification for terrorism and abolishing the gender binary and militant violent queer activism. And this is one of the craziest manifestos. It's released by a group called the Nihilistic Violent Extremist Party, which uses Nazi font, and I'm sure what is supposed to be like an ironic way. But yeah, so no one else was talking about this but me, per fucking usual. I'm sure conservative influencers and Andy No will figure this out in about 3 months. Book dues in the mood for crazy queer education, you're going to get it today. Well, the same people who released the queer manifesto, the nihilistic violent extremists, they're out with something new. They're out with something new. This is brand new as of like literally the other day. And it says how, I know the font is hard to read, but we're going to get a computer to read it for us. It'll be fine. How liberal identity politics saved the gay from fascism. I think that's what it says. So pave the way, pave the way. Oh my God, I totally misread that because the font is real. How liberal identity politics paved the way for fascism. How liberal identity politics paved the way for fascism. So this is a post on their website, and I thought we would just read this. Does everyone want to read this? This is by the Be Gay Do, the Be Queer Do Terrorism group. I thought we would just take a few minutes out at the beginning of the stream and actually just read this document or get the AI to read it for us, so that we can know what's going on when no one else on the internet knows what's going on. And, the conservative influencers will be getting around to covering this in several months or even years from now. So you guys can say you always heard it here first. Thank you, OC, for the cover charge. I really do appreciate that. Before we get into the trans-liberation stuff, I do want to read this real quick. I want to get the AI to read it for us because I ain't reading that. It's in a weird font. Okay. Actually, the rest of it's actually pretty okay. But let me get my little AI reader up and running, and hopefully it works. And let's see what the queer Marxists on the nihilistic violent extremist blog have to say.
How liberal identity politics paved the way for fascism. Insurrectionists, nihilists, and queer anarchists are constantly railing against the identity politics endemic to liberalism, which has wormed its way into anarchism by way of the would-be revolutionaries who view anarchy simply as an intensification of liberal goals.
Okay, I need to make sure to point something out for people who might be new to queer Marxism, and I want everyone for both this document and for the presentation that we're going to watch, please make sure you are asking questions, okay? If you're new, if this language is confusing to you, especially if you watched a lot of conservative influencer content, we need to kind of bring you up to speed on what radical queer militants actually think and actually believe, because if you've come from the world of like conservative clickbait, you might not understand this stuff, and it's okay, because conservatives don't understand this stuff, and so they misinform their audience about what it is. The first thing I want to point out is this. So, number one, radical queer militants hate liberals. They are not on the same team. No, liberals are not their useful idiots. No, liberals are not doing their bidding. No, liberals are not passing their... No, none of that. Radical queer militants, queer Marxists, hate liberals because liberals uphold the capitalist order. Radical queer Marxists also, and this might be very counterintuitive to some people, do not engage in identity politics. One of the reasons they don't like liberals is because liberals engage in identity politics. Radical queer Marxists do not want identity to exist. They want to abolish all identity categories because they think that all identity categories are socially constructed by capitalism and they're not real categories, and you can't overthrow capitalism without literally abolishing identity. So in the very first sentence of this, they're saying insurrectionists, nihilists, and queer anarchists are constantly railing against the identity politics endemic to liberalism. Queer Marxists, radical queer militants, they do not like identity politics, and they do not like liberalism. And you have to understand this about them if you're going to understand the left, because their entire belief system stems from the idea that capitalism created all of these socially constructed identity categories, and that is the cultural apparatus that upholds capitalism, and that liberals, and when they say liberals, they mean Democrats, they mean liberals, and they mean progressives, they mean those more like, they mean people who vote for the Democratic Party. They blame liberalism for upholding these made up identity categories.
Which has wormed its way into anarchism by way of the would-be revolutionaries who view anarchy simply as an intensification of liberal goals. But most of the time, arguments against IDPOL focus on the nonsensicality and indirectly oppressive nature of identity itself, and with few concrete examples ever offer the material harm IDPOL can do. It's easy to get the impression that we complain about it simply because of the abstract ways in which an identitarian mindset and praxis can lead to reinforcement of oppressive structures.
See, so now they're saying it. Most of the time, arguments against identity politics focus on the nonsensicality and indirectly oppressive nature of identity itself. They're saying the idea of these identity categories, those are oppressive in and of themselves. And then it says, it's easy to get the impression that we complain about it simply because of the abstract ways in which identitarian mindset and praxis can lead to the reinforcement of oppressive structures. When they say reinforcement of oppressive structures, obviously they mean the cultural apparatus of capitalism, because to the far left, capitalism is not just an economic model, it's also a cultural model. They're not just trying to undo the economics, take over the means of production. They're trying to undo the culture that reproduces capitalism. And part of that culture is the identity categories that capitalism creates. That creates the oppressive structure of capitalism.
While it's true that IDPOL is nonsensical, abstract, and indirectly oppressive, and it would be plenty of reason to oppose identitarian tendencies on that basis alone, they also create bigger problems that result in much more tangible and imminent threats, like the failure of American anarchists to sabotage the construction of a concentration camp in the Florida Everglades out of fear of alienating local indigenous groups.
So what they're saying is the fascist Trump administration is literally building a concentration camp. This is Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, right? The fascist Trumps are building a concentration camp, and the anarchists want to sabotage the construction of this, but they don't want to do it because they're engaging in identity politics by not wanting to alienate the local indigenous groups or whatever. So what they're saying is identity politics or placating the Native Americans, that's actually getting in the way of us literally destroying and abolishing a concentration camp that's being constructed right now.
Like the failure of American anarchists to sabotage the construction of a concentration camp in the Florida Everglades out of fear of alienating local indigenous groups. When Trump took office, the U.S. government and their allies immediately began building concentration camps in various places around the world, including one notorious site within the USS Alligator Alcatraz. When construction began, activists of various backgrounds and political leanings began protesting, and petitions were circulated by the ACLU, Amnesty International, and lots of other groups, begging fascist politicians to be less fascist. Some individuals disillusioned with democracy and legitimate forms of protest, but too far away to get directly involved, suggested local Floridians take inspiration from the ELF, the ALF, and more recent opposition to Cop City in Atlanta. The response from Florida-based anarchists like Skunk Ape Liberation Union was a resounding no, but at least ostensibly, not out of fear of potential risks like getting shot or arrested.
See, so here's where they start to give us information that's useful. I've never heard of Skunk Ape Liberation
The response from Florida-based
Hang on. Don't talk over me. Oh, look at this. Skunk Ape Liberation Union has over 20,000 followers on Twitter, 1,000 followers on Instagram. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Okay, well, that's another radical leftist group in Florida. Great. Yo, thank you for the super sticker, KK. I really do appreciate the support.
The so-called anarchists simply felt it was not their place to take control of the movement, opting to let local indigenous organizers lead, simply because of their race. Multiple supposed anarchists in Florida explicitly said they were stepping back to let local indigenous groups lead the movement.
So they're basically, so what the nihilistic, violent, queer extremists are doing, because remember, like, listen, this is important for people to understand. Antifa are anarchists, right? Antifa are anarchists. They're far left anarcho-communists. Antifa are not necessarily queer Marxists, even though many of them are. So when you're looking at queer Marxism in particular, and what we're reading right now, we can tell because it's pink text. What we're reading right now is queer Marxism. This is a radical, militant, violent, evolved ideology on the extreme far left. It is extremely dystopian. They want to abolish all gender. They want to abolish the nuclear family. They want to abolish all the cultural norms that uphold capitalism. They want to abolish identity. Queer Marxism is its own niche on the far left. You can be a revolutionary communist and an anarcho-communist without being a queer Marxist. Okay. So we're always concerned about revolutionary groups because revolutionary groups want to overthrow the government. Of course, that's bad. These people don't believe in elections. They're basically they're extremists in their own right, right? Not every person who is a revolutionary communist is also a queer Marxist. There is overlap in the groups, but queer Marxism is its own thing. And it's important to understand this because I always kind of preach about you have to understand the nuance between the different groups on the left because not all the different groups on the left behave in the same way. And you're actually seeing here the queer Marxists are calling out what they're going to call so-called anarchists because the anarchists are like, we need to let the Native Americans lead the way on this protest of Alligator Alcatraz, whereas the queer Marxists are basically calling the anarchists a bunch of pussies because the queer Marxists are like, we don't want fucking identity to exist. Why are we bending the knee to identity politics when we don't want this to exist? You guys are allowing a concentration camp to be constructed in Florida because you're engaging in liberal identity politics. They're basically the queer Marxists are calling them a bunch of pussies. Does everyone understand this? The far left is militant. They are radical. But some of them are more militant and violent and radical than others. Does everyone understand this? And if you don't understand it, it's fine, but you need to tell me because you need to, the far left is not a monolith. You can be a far leftist, you can be a revolutionary communist without being a queer Marxist. And the queer Marxists are the farthest of the far left. You do not get more far left than this, okay? They're the most militant. They're the most violent. They're the most radical. They're calling anarcho-communists a bunch of pussies because the anarcho-communists are like, listen, we really think the indigenous people should be leading this because they're engaging in identity politics. And the queer Marxists are like, what the fuck? Okay. Seems like people more or less understand this. Good.
Multiple supposed anarchists in Florida explicitly said they were stepping back to let local indigenous groups lead the movement. Those indigenous activists wanted to use nonviolence. So the anarchists urged everyone to stay docile. This essay comes to mind.
Let's see what this essay is real quick. Let me see what this essay is. This essay that they link to, another word for... The essay that they link to is called Another Word for White Ally is Coward. And it seems to have been written in St. Louis at the beginning of the BLM movement in August 2015. That's funny. That's funny. Touche, queer Marxists. Touche.
We, at Enemy Press and the NBP, would never insist that anyone must sacrifice himself their safety or freedom for the greater good, or anything like that. But it's one thing to simply choose not to take a risky action because of the risks involved, and it's another thing entirely to vocalize opposition to the prospect of anyone taking direct destructive actions in opposition to fascism, because of how those subversive actions may upset the more liberal-minded POC activist allies, which is exactly what multiple anarchists in Florida did. And to the surprise of the liberals, including the ones calling themselves anarchists and no one else, the nonviolent tactics accomplished nothing.
The non-violent tactics accomplished nothing. For those who didn't take the time to read the Be Queer, Do Terrorism manifesto that this same group wrote, part of the point that the manifesto makes is non-violent tactics do not accomplish anything. Therefore, we have to engage in violence. We have to literally engage in terrorism in order to accomplish our goals. So they're calling non-violent protest tactics basically ineffective, and they're shitting on the people, the so-called anarchists that wanted to engage non-violently because they're saying, this doesn't even work, you idiots.
The detention and to the surprise of the liberals, including the ones calling themselves anarchists and no one else, the nonviolent tactics accomplished nothing. The detention facility was built, opened, and used, and it's still being used today, December 2025. Fascists built another concentration camp in the United States, and a number of anarchists decided it was more important to appease the liberals than to oppose the fascists. This is, of course, a microcosm of a long-running trend of liberals trying to control anarchists by insinuating that one, anyone using direct action is a straight white cis male, and two, straight white cis men experience no oppression and are morally obligated to follow the leadership of oppressed peoples who are inherently more educated and capable of understanding the consequences of different tactics and developing safe and effective strategies.
Okay, this is actually really, 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 really important that people understand this. The radical, violent, queer Marxists are making fun of the idea of white privilege and being a good white ally. That is what they're doing. So all of this conservative clickbait content where you see like so-called leftists like shitting on white people and stuff like that, you have got to understand that that does not represent the position of the far left, of the real militants. And this is why it's so important to distinguish between groups. Because the real militants do not believe in doing anything based on skin color. It's always about the oppressive systems of capitalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they're saying here, let's read again. This is a microcosm of the long-running thread of liberals trying to control anarchists by insinuating that anyone using direct action is a straight white cis male, and two, straight white cis men experience no oppression and are morally obligated to follow the leadership of the oppressed people. They're making fun of identity politics. They're making fun of the idea of white people being allied. They're saying this is bullshit because, again, the people that we're reading right now, they don't believe that identity should exist. And so they're like, you're letting these stupid socially constructed identity categories that were created by capitalism control how you show up in the world. And you're calling anyone who engages in direct action a straight white cis man, by which they mean heteronormative, by which they mean the norms that uphold capitalism. Does everyone get this? They're laughing. This is a great way to put it. They are laughing at mainstream intersectionality because the whole idea of intersectionality is identity categories. They don't think that identity categories should exist. I know it's hard. I know when you first encounter this stuff, I understand it's different. You just got to listen though. Ask questions if you have them.
And are morally obligated to follow the leadership of oppressed peoples who are inherently more educated and capable of understanding the consequences of different tactics and developing safe and effective strategies. We counter by stepping back to let the ineffectiveness of the liberals...
Hey, Laser Nathan over on Rumble says, I do not and I will not understand this. Then you have no reason to be in my stream, bro. If you refuse to listen and learn, if you downright refuse because you're being fucking obstinate, get the fuck off my stream and go back to Fox News. You're not smart enough to be here. The people that are here want to learn this information. We want to learn how our enemy thinks, because people like Laser Nathan are the reason that we lose to the left all the time, because they refuse to fucking listen and learn. So, bro, get the fuck off my stream.
And are morally obligated to follow the leadership of oppressed people. This is, of course, a microcosm of a long-running trend of liberals trying to control anarchists by insinuating that one, anyone using direct action is a straight white cis male, and two, straight white cis men experience no oppression and are morally obligated to follow the leadership of oppressed peoples who are inherently more educated and capable of understanding the consequences of different tactics and developing safe and effective strategies. We counter by stepping back to let the ineffectiveness of the liberal strategies speak for itself. IPAW has been used to defend oppressors countless times before, like when feminists got mad at rioters for breaking cop car windows during protests against police violence in Seattle in 2011. And try to turn the rest of the protesters against what they called the manarchists in their midst, because violence and destruction are inherently male actions, of course. So any rioter must be a man. And when
so again, what they're saying here is that it's liberal identity politics that gets in the way of us using violent direct action to defeat the fascists. They're saying it's the liberals that are holding them back from being violent, essentially. Hang on, we got a super chat here. Thank you, Juan. I was one of the conservative clickbait folks you mentioned. Thanks for all you do. I continue to learn from you. Hey, thanks, Juan. I really do appreciate that. You know, listen, there's a reason people get it caught up in conservative clickbait. It's interesting, it's quick, it's like a good hit of like dopamine or whatever. I totally get it. But people have got to start understanding that the conservative clickbait content is just not reflective of what the reality is on the left. And if you don't understand your enemy, you're never going to beat them. So
So any rioter must be a man. And when Black Lives Matter organizers physically got between angry rioters and scare cops to protect the police from the crowds during the 2020 riots in NYC, presenting themselves as representatives of the Black community, acting like they had a right to determine how everyone...
I just want to make note here. This is the second time they've done this. They're making fun of the idea of these identity-based communities, like the Black community, and it's got the trademark symbol. They also had up here oppressed people with the trademark symbol. They're making fun of these ideas of like building up these so-called communities around these oppressed categories, basically.
Presenting themselves as representatives of the Black community, acting like they had a right to determine how everyone protests. And since some of the Black people present were apprehensive about violent tactics, that somehow translated into a moral imperative that everyone must be nonviolent. But Florida 2025 might be the most clear example of IDPOL directly and explicitly defending our oppressors' efforts to consolidate and exercise power, directly leading to more oppression.
So they're saying, listen, this is not an insignificant thing. The liberal identity politics people are literally, explicitly defending the oppressors because they're getting in our way of committing violent, direct action. Hey, thanks, Suzanne. So glad to not have commercials. Yeah, I know. I can't do anything about the YouTube commercials. I can't, but I do appreciate the super chat. Somehow translated into a moral... Okay, so let's just go back a second here. Presenting themselves as representatives of the Black community, TM, acting like they had a right to determine how everyone protests. And since some of the Black people present were apprehensive about violent tactics, that somehow translated into a moral imperative that everyone be nonviolent. So they're saying the liberal identity politics people didn't want to use violence, and then they forced that belief on all of the other protesters, and because they were Black, people thought that they had to engage in nonviolence because the Black liberals were forcing them to engage in nonviolence. And then they say here, but Florida 2025 might be the most clear example of IDPOL, identity politics, directly and explicitly defending our oppressors' efforts to consolidate and exercise power, directly leading to more oppression.
Fascists began building a concentration camp. Direct sabotage was proposed. The use of effective tactics was rejected due to identity politics. Liberal tactics, protests, petitions, social media posts did nothing to prevent the facility being completed and opened. Big surprise there. People are now incarcerated in a concentration camp.
People are incarcerated in a concentration camp in Florida built by the fascists because we wanted to engage in violent militant tactics, and we were told no by the liberal identity politics people who just want to do protests and petitions and social media posts. And because of them, the facility was built, and now people are literally in a concentration camp. That's the logic that they're proposing with this piece. Direct action doesn't always mean terrorism. It could mean a number of things, but direct action is usually destructive. It's usually some sort of like they're lighting a fire to something, they're spray painting something, they're taking over a house and squatting in it. Sometimes it can be that they're just going and like breaking windows and things like that. So usually direct action is destructive in some ways. Sometimes it's more destructive than other times. Now, what they're saying here is that, again, they're saying that things like protests, petitions, social media posts, those things are nonviolent, those things are non-destructive. They're calling them liberal tactics, okay? Yeah, direct action could also be like physically doing something outside of the ICE facility. That's not now, and again, it's not always violent. It's not always like the destruction of property. It could be like direct action could be like the protesters in Portland yelling at the ICE agents as they go in and out of the facility. It could be something like, writing down the license plates of the ICE vehicles as they're leaving the facility to try to dox them later. It could be something like how they try to figure out where the ICE agents are staying, and then they go to their hotels and they make a whole bunch of noise. That would be considered a direct action. Okay? Now I know this is confusing because it's a little bit of a nebulous definition, but that's what they're talking about.
People are now incarcerated. It's true that Id Paul is always cringe, nonsensical, and fucking annoying, giving off, I majored in liberal arts with a minor in humanities at Berkeley vibes. And that is more than enough reason to punch anyone who promotes it. But it goes so much deeper than that. Identitarianism only benefits our enemies and kills any insurrectional, revolutionary, and subversive potential. And that costs real people their freedom and sometimes their lives. Id Paul puts people in material mortal danger when it dissuades activists from dismantling the apparatuses fascists are using to press us. All liberal tendencies need to be fully excised from the anarchist milieu immediately. Anyone continuing to promote Id Paul at this point is not an anarchist or an ally. They're on the fascist side, whether they know it or not.
Okay, and they said it all at the very end, right? All liberal tendencies need to be fully excised from the anarchist milieu, the Antifa, the queer militant milieu, immediately. No liberals allowed. Anarchists, Antifa, queer Marxists do not like liberals. If you're a liberal, you are literally supporting fascism. You are no different than the fascists. Anyone continuing to promote identity politics at this point is not an anarchist or an ally. They're on the fascist side, whether they know it or not. So that's the end of the piece. Important update from the nihilistic violent extremists. And again, if you want to read the original Be Queer Do Terrorism manifesto, you can find it over on my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Just click the little magnifying glass and do a search for Be Queer Do Terrorism. It'll come right up, I promise. And if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best way to do that is by becoming a member of the Substack. That is $8 a month, $80 a year. I'm going to be uploading the analysis that we just did to the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club, which you can find in the book club section. This is where we read militant, violent leftist content and we break it down and we analyze it. Got a little bit of an archive there. Do I need to look at the other post? Okay. Well, Master Shake is telling me I need to look at the other post. So I guess let's go back. Let's go back and see what else they wrote. Giving thanks. This one. This is the one you want me to look at? Okay. Giving thanks. Post number 2. It can be easy, perhaps now more than ever, to feel like everything is going to shit. All of our hopes for the future evaporate before our eyes. So it's important to remember that there are still things to appreciate, to be thankful for. Holy shit. This Thanksgiving, we give thanks to the 2 National Guard shitbags getting shot in Washington, D.C. Wow! Do you guys take me seriously now when I say these people are violent, militant terrorists? And again, literally, no one on the right is covering this. No one on the right is talking about this. We are the only people following this group and tracking this group. Yep. Okay. They thanked the person who shot the National Guardman for Thanksgiving. All right. Well, if you want to support my work covering violent, militant, queer activist groups that no one else on the internet is covering, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. Sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. I'm completely 100% funded by you. I have no political masters. My only job is to show you the primary source evidence so that you can judge for yourself what's going on. Yeah, funny how Andy No didn't cover that, isn't it? Funny how Andy No didn't bother to cover that. I thought that he was the king master of all things Antifa, and he didn't cover that, didn't tell anyone about that. So I'll do it. I'll do it. Andy wants to be a Twitter journalist over in London. He only wants to cover things that go viral on Twitter. I'll show you the real shit. You're not going to get it anywhere else. And speaking of that, we are going to be moving into the presentation portion of the stream now, where we are literally going to be watching a trans liberation training that was just uploaded to YouTube today from the Tempest Collective. The Tempest Collective is a group of radical, violent, queer, not queer. Actually, I won't even say, well, no, many of them are queer. Let me rephrase. Strike that. The Tempest Collective is a revolutionary communist group of which some members are trans and queer. By trans, we don't mean transition. We mean transform or transcend. And they uploaded a presentation. This is the Tempest Collective in Vermont, which is actually a very active group in Vermont. They upload stuff actually on a fairly frequent basis. And they uploaded this presentation that apparently was done a couple weeks ago or almost a month ago now, I guess, called Resisting Transphobia, the Struggle for Trans Rights and Liberation. They uploaded this 3 hours ago. It has no views at all. And so we're going to watch it. I have no idea what's in this presentation, but I bet you it's going to be good. As a reminder, guys, before we get into that, in addition to supporting my work on Substack, another place you can support my work is by heading over to the Red Menace Supply Company. That is redmenacesupply.com. And there are still a couple days where you can get your merch for 25% off leading up to the holidays. And that is until the Sunday. Sunday is the day. Sunday is the day. Because until Sunday, you can take 25% off all orders of $100 or more. We've got some returning classic designs, including the Whiteness Mean Capitalism designs, the Mickey one, the soup can one, which I think the soup can one is very underrated myself. That's actually one of my favorite designs I've ever done. We got the Men Are Not Women design. I literally wear that t-shirt all the time. We're in 1984. That's one of my favorite designs I've ever made. Real Marxism. We've got the Be an Outcast design. We've got the McCarthy series. You can get these designs on hoodies and sweatshirts and I think even shot glasses and stuff like that. You can check that out. And also we've got some featured collections, just some newer stuff, the anti-Antifa design. But look at this one. Listen, I'm wearing this shirt right now. I'm literally wearing this shirt right now. I was so impressed at the printing quality that's been coming out of the merch store lately. Can I just say, I showed this to my husband earlier. I was like, look at this shirt. Doesn't this look fucking awesome? And he's like, yeah, actually, that looks great. Like the details are all out. The red is so bright. It's so striking in person. I know you can't really see it because I'm sitting down at my desk and I'm not going to get up. But like the printing on the shirts is getting really, 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 really good. The designs are coming out looking fucking awesome. I love my merch. And you know, part of the reason I make this stuff is I actually do wear my merch almost exclusively. And so if you want to get some really cool, sweet merch and support the work I'm doing and have some anti-communist swag that you can be running around in and some Plague Doctor stuff, because the Plague Doctor is like the coolest mascot ever, head over to the Red Menace Supply Company. That is redmenacesupply.com. Pick up some stuff. Spend over $100 and get it for 25% off until Sunday at midnight. And then it all goes back up to the normal price. So get some swag, guys. Do it. Let's see. Do I have anything else to talk about? That's it. All right, let's get to this. Uh-oh. Got to ban that guy over on Rumble because he's still whining and complaining. There we go. All right. We're doing an hour and a half presentation, guys. So everyone get a 13 views now. Oh, I'm sorry. It's got 13 views now. 3 of them were probably me. Let's see what we have here. Ambrose, UVM trans student organizer. UVM is the University of Vermont. Eric, the Tempest Collective. Clarissa, Lars Gold from South Burlington, and the Educators Association. So apparently the teachers unions are involved in this. Okay. Okay. Play.
UVM Staff United Union and also a member of the Tempest Collective here. As you know, tonight's discussion is resisting transphobia, the struggle for trans rights and liberation today. The reasons for this meeting should be obvious. The Trump administration has declared war literally on transgender people in a way that feels incredibly frightening and regressive.
Literally
and in the context
war.
of attacks coming down from this administration on everybody, there's clearly no answer but solidarity. So we wanted to have a discussion in that spirit. I did want to start with a moment of silence to remember Leah Smith, who I feel like unfortunately embodies the consequences of the kinds of hateful and vicious attacks that are coming down from the Trump administration. This is a student at Middlebury College who took her life a few weeks ago. So I'd like everybody to reflect for a moment in silence in her memory. And I think we can dedicate tonight's meeting to her and vow that we take her spirit and
Listen,
embody
I don't mean to disrupt the somberness of this moment, but like you guys don't understand. I grew up in Vermont, okay? I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in a small town in central Vermont. Just looking at this whole scene where they're all in a farmhouse somewhere and it's got all these built-in it's just like this is the most fucking Vermont thing that I've ever seen. People are wearing flannel. Like there's an old school farmhouse. Everyone's gathered in a big room and they're all sitting around in different chairs. I promise you every single chair in that room is different. And it's just like it's such a fucking trip because it's just so Vermont. It's so classic Vermont. Yeah, it's a 167-year-old barn out in the middle of the woods. Exactly.
in order to fight back going forward. So before I introduce the panelists, I did want to have Ashley come up and say a few words about organizing tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Tristan. I just wanted to say a couple of words because
sweet,
I
thanks,
helped
music
organize the panel, and we got some responses on our social media ad about not having a trans femme speaker on it, and I want to thank people for calling our attention to that mistake. And I think we should just own that, and we'll never let that happen again. And so, what we wanted to do in this meeting is privilege in the discussion the contribution of trans femme speakers, and especially any trans femme speakers of color, so that we make sure that we include those voices as much as possible in the discussion. And I'm personally happy to meet with anybody and to repair any harm and broken sense of trust and solidarity, because especially in this moment, we can't afford to let any people divide us. We have to be united against the Trump administration, and when we make mistakes, we have to own them so that the solidarity is genuinely built, because we're going to need that in the fight of our lives that we're in the middle of. So I just want to apologize for that mistake, own it, and we'll correct it now and into the future. So thank you.
So what they were saying, just for people who don't speak leftist, they have a trans student on the panel, but it's a trans masculine student. It's a woman who is pretending to be a man, essentially. And when they announced the panel, they got feedback from the community that it was bigoted that they didn't have a trans woman or trans femme on the channel, preferably a Black trans woman because of intersectionality. And now the old white man, the old straight cisgendered white man, has to issue a public apology for not having a trans Black woman on the panel and promising to do better in the future.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so our speakers tonight, we're really lucky to have with us a number of just outstanding speakers and advocates. So I'll introduce each in turn, and then we'll hear from each of them, and then we'll actually have plenty of time for a discussion and questions. So Eric Maroney, to my right, is a community college professor and PhD student at the University of Connecticut.
Oh,
His work
yeah?
has appeared in Spectre Journal, the English Journal, the American Philosophy Association,
Spectre is a hardcore revolutionary communist magazine.
LGBTQ Bulletin, New Politics, and Tempest Magazine. He's a member of the Tempest Collective as well. Lars Gold is a public school teacher in South Burlington High School, where they currently teach alternative science-based curricula. Lars graduated
Public school teacher in South Burlington High School. Apparently we need to start spying on the Burlington schools again. Apparently that's a thing that's going to happen. Actually, we should, because the Burlington schools every single year in the spring semester, they do their annual queer training. And so this is actually a good reminder that we got to check in with the Burlington School District. And last time they only did their, like, so for people who don't know, like 3 years ago, I caught the Burlington School District publicly grooming middle school students on the internet. It was one of the biggest stories I ever broke. It was all over the place. It was on the Daily Wire, it was on Fox News, all this stuff. No one gave me credit for my work per usual. But after I caught the Burlington School District publicly grooming middle schoolers on the internet, they then took all their trainings in person and they don't do them on the internet anymore, but they still do them. And I'm not opposed to driving up there and secretly recording it. I'm just saying.
from UVM in 2019 with an undergraduate. Lars Gold is a public school teacher in South Burlington High School, where they currently teach alternative science-based curricula. Lars graduated from UVM in 2019 with an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and again in 2023 with their master's in teaching. Since the inception of their teaching career, Lars has worked closely with their local unions, serving as both the bargaining team negotiator and the co-grievance chair of the South Burlington Educators Association. Their passion and commitment to organizing emanates from a steadfast belief that education should be pursuant of healing, justice, and liberation for all. Ambrose Moore in the center is a trans student organizer at the University of Vermont, who focuses on mobilizing for collective action.
Rose, wouldn't it be funny if we get that Tim Pool looking motherfucker to say something crazy? It would actually, you know what we should do? If we get that Tim Pool looking motherfucker to say something, like if we get him on video saying something crazy, we should unironically release it saying Tim Pool advocated for transing and queering kids or something like. We should make it seem as though it's actually Tim Pool, just because it would it would like trigger everyone. Yeah, trans Tim. Yeah, we should probably try to get him fired too. We should probably try to do that.
Between on and off-campus groups. His passion for organizing stems from the need to create the community he struggled to have growing up, one that is not only accepting but empowering. So I will turn it over to each of you, and thanks again for coming and agreeing to kick off this discussion.
It does look like Tim, though. That's crazy.
Awesome. Good evening, everybody. As the comrade introduced me, my name is Eric.
Comrade. Karlyn, you mentioned trans is not transitioning. What is it again? That's a great question for people who are new. In this context, you guys have got to understand, we are watching Queer Marxists right now. These are far left queer Marxists. When queer Marxists are saying the term trans, they do not mean transition from man to woman or woman to man. They mean transform or transcend gender. So queer Marxists, they want to abolish the gender binary. They want to abolish all identity categories. They want to transform gender. They want to transcend gender. They're the ones that use they, them. And so it's important you understand the difference, because people who want to abolish the gender, as we just saw in the essay earlier, they don't want people to transition from man to woman or woman to man, because they don't want gender to exist.
Eric, up visiting from New Haven, Connecticut. Excited to reconnect with some old friends and also very much looking forward to making some new ones. So I thought that I would kind of
Timmy.
try to follow from your example. And I wanted to begin my remarks by just acknowledging that there's likely a lot of pain and grief in the room. That really, whenever a group of marginalized or targeted people gather together, particularly in a moment of such kind of outward political violence, grief and pain are present, but that also there may be people who are experiencing a kind of intimate version of that. And so to acknowledge that, I wanted to begin by offering some words from the labor journalist Sarah Jaffe, if you're familiar with her book. It's called Grief and Revolution in a World on Fire. And so Jaffe writes the following. She says, grief is rupture. It is sudden, abrupt, even violent break from the status quo, even if you weren't expecting it, even if you had felt it before. She goes on to reflect on her own grief, writing, I was not expecting the howling storm, the black hole it opened up around me and inside of me. She goes on to define grief, saying, grief is rage and anger and frustration and sadness, and sometimes it's a horrible kind of joy. It is less an emotion than a state of being. It is being undone. It is a realization of one's own vulnerability. And so I would add, and Jaffe gets at this in the book too, that collective grief is also a sense of power, right? And so our task kind of here this evening and also beyond is to sit with that collective mourning, but also to move through it, right? So that we can begin to arrive at a place where we can refuse the kind of violences that call us together. So with that said, and with the kind of time I have remaining, I want to make some observations that I think, well, I hope, will help us arrive at that refusal together. And so the first thing I want to say is that the violent authoritarian attack on queer, trans, gender nonconforming people is not a culture war, right? We know that. We need to absolutely reject that.
Okay, I want to be very clear about what we're doing here, because I'm seeing some people in the chat owning the libs by saying this isn't real for reason X, Y, B, and Z. No one fucking cares about your opinion, guys. The people in the video cannot hear you saying, do you know this is not true for a reason X, Y? No one cares. No one cares about your debunk. It's not going to make any difference. The purpose of this exercise is to listen to the left and understand what they believe. How do people not fall asleep at these events? If you don't want to be here, get the fuck out. This is unhelpful. This is a serious research group. This is a research exercise. We listen to the presentations. We break down the language. We figure out what they're talking about. We figure out what ideas are important. We figure out how they're organizing and strategizing. If you are not equipped to be here, then get the fuck out. Okay, you are getting banned for 5 minutes. If you come back and continue to shitpost in my chat, you will be permanently banned. I am deadly fucking serious. Take this seriously. If you don't take it seriously, go somewhere else.
Nor is it a simple backlash against a sort of progressive identity movement that has, quote, gone too far, too fast, as the first openly trans Congresswoman, Sarah McBride, suggested when she appeared on Ezra Klein's podcast earlier this year. Instead, we have to understand the attack on gender nonconforming and trans people as inextricably linked to the crises of capitalism. That we know we live under neoliberalism.
I'm clipping this. Hang on. Look at that. Look at that beautiful. This is all being caused by capitalism.
Too far, too fast. as the first openly trans Congresswoman, Sarah McBride, suggested when she appeared on Ezra Klein's podcast earlier this year. Instead, we have to understand the attack on gender nonconforming and trans people as inextricably linked to the crises of capitalism. That we know we live under neoliberalism, right? The form of capitalism that we live under, a form that has, for a long time, favored deregulation, disinvestment in public goods, and an unfettered free market. But that this version, or capitalism in general, but this specific version is no longer working, right? And there is agreement, not only amongst working people, but from the elite as well, right? It's no longer working. That since the Great Recession, 2008, global capital has struggled with slow and low growth. And that this was only exacerbated by the COVID-19 shutdowns, which first, we all know, resulted in economic downturn, followed by inflation that we're still trying to get our arms around. Although Trump will tell you that everything is wonderful. It's the greatest economy that ever existed. So just for a little context to try to illustrate and tease this out a bit more, if we look at the 17 years since the 2007-2008 recession, US GDP has remained below 3% in all but 2 of those years, most often hovering around 2%, in some cases near 0. In contrast, if we look at the years between 1961 to 2007, US GDP was at or above 3% for 30 of those years, oftentimes around 5%, and record number in 1984, I think 7.4%. That level of profitability and growth is no longer sustainable, right? And there's reasons that I don't have time to get into, but perhaps people can take that up in conversation. Importantly for us, however, the Democrats seemingly have no solution for the political and social crises that have been wrought by this economic instability. However, on the other hand, Trump and the MAGA Republicans have offered a kind of neoliberalism on steroids, right? They're pairing severe neoliberal domestic policy with authoritarianism and repression. And the recent attacks on healthcare and SNAP benefits, I think, illustrate this very well. Trumpism seeks to withdraw from what remains of the welfare state, redirecting tax dollars towards military spending, border patrol, and further deregulating the economy in effort to restore profitability. However, and this is important, that the dismantling of public goods and entitlements is not automatic.
Okay, what the fuck did I just say less than 5 fucking minutes ago? What did I just say 5 fucking minutes ago? The people in the video cannot hear you. Okay, you just got permanently banned from my channel. Bye. None of that. I don't want to see it. I really don't want to fucking see it. We have serious shit to do. Let me save this clip. People can't follow basic fucking instructions when we're actually trying to research something. They can fuck off.
That it requires both brute force, right? And we can think about the images of the violent ICE raids coming out of places like Chicago and elsewhere. It also requires a kind of...
All right. Apparently we need to do some retard cleansing in the chat today. Is this a hobby? No. This is not a fucking hobby. Time out. Don't say that again.
Ideological cover. That is the sorting of whole groups of people into the deserving and into the disposable. And according to this right-wing logic, trans people are absolutely among them.
Okay, I need to go back.
What remains, and the recent attacks on healthcare and SNAP benefits, I think, illustrate this very well. Trumpism seeks to withdraw from illustrate repression. And the recent attacks on healthcare and SNAP benefits, I think, illustrate this very well. Trumpism seeks to withdraw from what remains of the welfare state, redirecting tax dollars towards military spending, border patrol, and further deregulating the economy in effort to restore profitability. However, and this is important, that the dismantling of public goods and entitlements is not automatic, that it requires both brute force, right? And we can think about the images of the violent ICE raids coming out of places like Chicago and elsewhere. It also requires a kind of ideological cover. That is the sorting of whole groups of people into the deserving and into the disposable. And according to this right-wing logic, trans people are absolutely among the disposable. That are quote unquote fraudulent efforts to gain access to public goods, things like education and healthcare, serve as a wholesale justification to further deregulate and disinvest and gatekeep, right, which harms the class as a whole. If you saw it last week, I think there's no better example of this than the USDA website, okay? In the middle of the SNAP crisis, where Trump was using food stamps as a weapon to try to reopen the government, splashed across the website banner, and I kid you not, splashed across the website banner of the USDA said the following, quote, "We're approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. We can either continue to hold out for health care for quote unquote illegal immigrants and quote unquote gender mutilation, or we can reopen the government so that mothers, babies, and the most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutrition assistance." The rhetorical conceit, similar to Reagan's use of the welfare queen, right? It's a statement that positions trans people and undocumented people as both dishonest and undeserving, standing in the way of the patriotic citizens' access to legitimate and necessary care. So the attack on gender nonconforming and trans people fundamentally about disciplining ordinary people into accepting less investment and also greater exploitation. That restoring profitability to this system requires, yes, a stagnation and reduction in wages, but it also requires that the employer class invest less in the reproduction of working people, invest less in healthcare, invest less in education, invest less in infrastructures of care more broadly. But just because these care infrastructures are anemic, thin, hollowed out, doesn't mean that the need for care does not exist. Even if the state refuses to fund healthcare, people will still get sick. If we refuse to fund education, children and adults will still need to learn. And the group that is responsible, most often responsible, for carrying out this labor will continue to be women, cisgendered women, and feminized people. And I would argue, and perhaps we'll take this up in conversation, that whether you are trans feminine or trans masculine, our society feminizes you and feminizes your labor. So in this way, the attacks on trans and gender nonconforming people are also very much about shoring up the borders around womanhood so as to reconstitute or to stabilize gender divisions of labor, the exploitation that capital has always relied upon. And so in this way, this is in part why the arguments coming from the TERFs, or if hopefully you're familiar with the phrase I prefer, the farts, the feminist appropriating radical transphobes, are so absolutely insidious that the attack on trans folks is also an attack on cisgendered women. Let's remember that during the COVID shutdown, we all experienced a kind of almost like a Keynesian experience.
Okay, I need to stop there. There's just so much to break down in that. Let me just make sure I have there's a ton of stuff to break down in that. A ton of stuff to break down in that. First, I want to say, this person in the chat says, I know this is important. It's just hard to listen to these people. Well, guess what's also hard? Guess what's also hard? Your kids being indoctrinated by these people in public school every single day. You're complaining because we're less than 15 minutes into this presentation and you're already complaining. You're probably also the same type of person that sends your children to public schools for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours a day to learn from these people. So how do you think your fucking kids feel about it? You're miserable after 15 fucking minutes. How do you think your kids feel about going to the indoctrination factories that you guys send them to every single day that are completely controlled by these people? You want to know why the left wins? Because conservatives start whining after 10 to 15 minutes of listening to a leftist presentation. All right. We need to go back. What is this person talking about? We need to go back and break this down for people who need me to break it down. Mizakan says feminized people equals assigned female labor roles, unpaid care work remain in the private sphere, birth and raise the next generation of workers. What they're talking about is they're saying capitalism created these gender roles based on reproductive ability or based on the contribution you're making with your labor, where men go into the workplace, they have all the power and all the money. Women, or the feminine roles, do the unpaid care work in the private sphere. Men are in the public sphere, women are in the private sphere, and they're raising the next generation of proletarian workers. What this person is also saying is that essentially all trans people should be considered to be in a feminine role. All trans people, regardless of whether they're masculine or feminine, should be considered to be in the oppressed category. This is the very basis of what queer Marxism is. Queer Marxism viewing being gender nonconforming, or back in the day it was gay, but now it's more gender nonconforming. Gender nonconforming, by the way, someone asked this earlier in the chat. Gender nonconforming means you do not conform to the gender binary. The gender binary is men and women. They believe that capitalism created the socially constructed categories of men and women. When they're saying gender nonconforming, they're saying you do not conform to the gender binary. All right? So they're saying that anyone who is gender nonconforming is inherently in an oppressed group in our society. Does everyone understand this? We're going to go back and listen to this again. I don't give a fuck. We do not care what you believe. We care what they believe. We're just way into the land of retardation today, man. We're 10 minutes into the presentation. We're already in retardation.
Welfare state, redirecting tax dollars towards military spending, border patrol, and further deregulating the economy in effort to restore profitability. However, and this is important, that the dismantling of public goods and entitlements is not automatic, that it requires both brute force, right? And we can think about the images of the violent ICE raids coming out of places like Chicago and elsewhere. It also requires a kind of ideological cover. That is the sorting of whole groups of people into the deserving and into the disposable.
The sorting of whole groups of people into the deserving and the disposable. They're talking about creating the oppressor versus oppressed categories.
And according to this right-wing logic, trans people are absolutely among the disposable. That our quote-unquote fraudulent efforts to gain access to public goods, things like education and healthcare, serve as a wholesale justification to further deregulate and disinvest and gatekeep, right, which harms the class as a whole. If you saw it last week, I think there's no better example of this than the USDA website, okay? In the middle of the SNAP crisis, where Trump was using food stamps as a weapon to try to reopen the government, splashed across the website banner, and I kid you not, splashed across the website banner of the USDA said the following, quote, "We're approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. We can either continue to hold out for health care for quote unquote illegal immigrants and quote unquote gender mutilation, Or we can reopen the government so that mothers, babies, and the most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutrition assistance. The rhetorical conceit, similar to Reagan's use of the welfare queen, right? It's a statement that positions trans people and undocumented people as both dishonest and undeserving, standing in the way of the patriotic citizens' access to legitimate and necessary care. So the attack on gender nonconforming and trans people fundamentally about disciplining ordinary people into accepting less investment and also greater exploitation. That restoring profitability to this system requires, yes, a stagnation and reduction in wages, but it also requires that the employer class invest less in the reproduction of working people, invest less in healthcare, invest less in education, invest less in infrastructures of care more broadly. But just because these care infrastructures are anemic, thin, hollowed out, doesn't mean that the need for care does not exist. Even if the state refuses to fund healthcare, people will still get sick. If we refuse to fund education, children and adults will still need to learn. And the group that is responsible, most often responsible, for carrying out this labor will continue to be women, cisgendered women, and feminized people. And I would argue, and perhaps we'll take this up in conversation, that whether you are trans feminine or trans masculine, our society feminizes you and feminizes your labor. So in this way, the attacks on trans and gender nonconforming people are also very much about shoring up the borders around womanhood so as to reconstitute or to stabilize gender divisions of labor, the exploitation that capital has always relied upon. And so in this way, this is in part why the arguments coming from the TERFs, or if hopefully you're familiar with the phrase I prefer, the farts, the feminist appropriating radical transphobes, are so absolutely insidious that the attack on trans folks is also an attack on cisgendered women. Let's remember that during the COVID shutdown, we all experienced a kind of almost like a Keynesian experience. All of a sudden, there's money. There's money to invest in families. Not all families, but some families. After decades of abandonment, right? Suddenly this money is made available. There's economic impact payments. There's the enhanced child tax credit monthly going to families. And the result of this is enormous. Poverty drops to a record low of 8%. Short-lived, right? Short-lived, because part of this is also the retrenchment of traditionalist gender roles preceding COVID, right? Of course. But the retrenchment of traditionalist gender roles, the attack on trans people is so much about beating those expectations out of us that we got a glimpse of what investment in the class would look like, and we need to beat that out of people. So, and I'm going to wrap up very soon. I want to just say a couple of things about perhaps where we go from here. What do we do? I want to say I loved the Mom Donnie trans ad. I loved it. I loved that he showed up at Poppy Juice at 2 a.m. to get out the vote. If you're unfamiliar, Poppy Juice is a queer of color dance space in Brooklyn, right? His campaign shows us that Democrats do not have to throw trans people under the bus in order to win. And we have to remind them of that at every turn. And I'm not talking necessarily elected Democrats. I'm talking about the Democrats that we fight shoulder to shoulder with. The trans politics, trans issues are not
Stop
the third rail
debunking
in politics. So that's one of the things we have to do. Next, I would offer, though,
There is a reason we have a no debunking rule on this channel, because every single time you are debunking, you are not fucking listening to what is being said. Every time you are waiting to say something to get a good debunk in to own the libs, which is going to make no difference at all because they can't fucking hear you. You are not listening to what is being said. So enough with the fucking debunking. No one cares. It's not the point.
that electing progressive officials is not enough. I also argue that working within the Democratic Party is oftentimes a distraction, if not a diversion from real material resources that we need to be investing in movement building. We have to remember that the attack on trans people is not merely ideological, it's also material. And winning material victories is going to, like, alongside the cultural ones. We have to win material victories alongside the cultural ones, but that's going to take enormous effort and enormous resources. One that requires trans folks and cis folks to fight side by side in order to address the crises of capitalism in our schools, in our workplaces, and beyond. Also, just a few more sentences here. I think it's imperative that we tie the attack on trans folks to the crises of capitalism more broadly, that we emphasize the relationship between the attacks on trans people and the attacks on social provisioning.
Hang on,
Also,
gotta
so
clip that.
capitalism in our schools, material victories alongside the cultural ones, but that's going to be logical. It's also material, and winning material victories is going to be building. We have to remember that the attack on trans people is not.
God damn it.
Next, I would
Almost
offer,
there.
though, that electing progressive officials is not enough. I also argue that working within the Democratic Party is oftentimes a distraction, if not a diversion from real material resources.
Shit, I need to get that too. It's a great clip.
Poppy juice at 2 a.m. to get out the vote. If you're unfamiliar, Poppy Juice is a queer of color dance space in Brooklyn, right? His campaign shows us that Democrats do not have to throw trans people under the bus in order to win. And we have to remind them of that at every turn. And I'm not talking necessarily elected Democrats. I'm talking about the Democrats that we fight shoulder to shoulder with. The trans politics, trans issues are not the third rail in politics. So that's one of the things we have to do. Next, I would offer, though, that electing progressive officials is not enough. I also argue that working within the Democratic Party is oftentimes a distraction, if not a diversion from real material resources that we need to be investing in movement building. We have to remember that the attack on trans people is not merely ideological, it's also material. And winning material victories is going to, like, alongside the cultural ones. We have to win material victories alongside the cultural ones, but that's going to take enormous effort and enormous resources. One that requires trans folks and cis folks to fight side by side in.
We're going to redo this clip. I want everyone in the chat that continues to talk when I have begged you to stop debunking shit. I want every single person in the chat right now to define for me what is the goal of queer Marxism. Go. Gregory, I'm looking at you. Peter, I'm looking at you. JF, I'm looking at you. What is the goal of queer Marxism? I want the definition of for every single person in the chat right now. If you're saying it's the elimination of capitalism, you're not actually explaining what it is. And that's also not the definition I gave earlier. Do not fucking take the fucking weak ass lazy fucking position on this. What is the goal of queer Marxism explicitly? I explained it less than 10 minutes ago. If you cannot answer this question, you need to be shutting the fuck up in the chat and listening. I do not want any more of this shit posting bullshit. The goal of queer Marxism is to abolish the gender binary and the nuclear family, which are the cultural mechanisms that uphold capitalism. If you did not say that explicitly, you did not get the answer correct. And if you just said to abolish capitalism because you were being lazy, that is not the correct answer. I don't want to see any more shitposting in the chat, particularly from all the people who have been shitposting the entire fucking time. I don't want to see it. If you didn't get that answer correct, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and you need to shut the fuck up and listen. If you have questions about what they are saying, you can ask a question about what they are saying. But I don't want to see any more fucking wood chipper comments. I don't want to see any more things about this isn't true for reason X, Y, B, and Z. I don't want to see any more of that. The goal of this is to research what they believe and learn. If you are not asking questions, then you really shouldn't be fucking talking unless you are commenting on something that they are saying. If you are commenting on something they're saying or expanding on it in an intelligent way, not in a shitposting way, you can do that. But if you are not fucking asking questions, I don't want to hear any fucking debunks. I don't want to hear any calls for the fucking wood chipper. I don't want to hear any dehumanization. I don't want to hear any of this shit that you would post on Twitter. I don't give a fuck. The purpose of this is to listen. You are wasting our time and our energy when you are filling the fucking chat with shit posting, and I'm not going to say it fucking again. I've had to stop the stream like 4 fucking times now to tell people to cut the shit. You are in a classroom. It might not feel like you're in a classroom because you're on YouTube, but you are in a fucking classroom right now. You're going to act like you're in a fucking classroom, and if you can't do that, get the fuck out. Now I'm going back, and I'm going to make this clip again.
Brand's ad. I loved it. I loved that he showed up at Poppy Juice at 2 a.m. to get out the vote. If you're unfamiliar, Poppy Juice is a queer of color dance space in Brooklyn, right? His campaign shows us that Democrats do not have to throw trans people under the bus in order to win. And we have to remind them of that at every turn. And I'm not talking necessarily elected Democrats. I'm talking about the Democrats that we fight shoulder to shoulder with. The trans politics, trans issues are not the third rail in politics. So that's one of the things we have to do. Next, I would offer, though, that electing progressive officials is not enough. I also argue that working within the Democratic Party is oftentimes a distraction, if not a diversion from real material resources that we need to be investing in movement building. We have to remember that the attack on trans people is not merely ideological, it's also material. And winning material victories is going to, like, alongside the cultural ones. We have to win material victories alongside the cultural ones, but that's going to take enormous effort and enormous resources. One that requires trans folks and cis folks to fight side by side in order to address the crises of capitalism in our schools, in our workplaces, and beyond. Also, just a few more sentences here. I think it's imperative that we tie the attack on trans folks to the crises of capitalism more broadly, that we emphasize the relationship between the attacks on trans people and the attacks on social provisioning or public goods, but also, and this is so important to get the balance right, that we also attend to the unique violences that trans people experience while also uplifting and celebrating trans lives. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Got the clip. Does everyone understand how trans or queer is inherently tied to capitalism? If you do not understand this, then you need to ask a question and you need to identify that you don't understand it so that we can explain it. Does everyone in the chat understand how trans? Okay, can you please explain it then? If you're saying yes, you understand, explain how trans and queer is inherently tied to capitalism. I'm not asking you to say yes, I'm asking you to explain it. If you understand and you don't need to ask a question, then explain it clearly and concisely. How is being trans or queer inherently tied to capitalism? If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. And if you just say capitalism, if you answer in a 2-word answer, you do not understand it. Nope, that's not correct. This is actually completely wrong. This is completely wrong. This is completely wrong. Queer are anti-assimilationists. They are not pro-assimilationists. Queer is these are anti-capitalists. They do not want to assimilate to capitalism. Completely and totally wrong. Trans and queer is non-conforming to the gender binary or the nuclear family, making them a direct enemy to capitalism and capitalist social norms. Well, yes, but that's not the question that I asked. That's not what I asked. I asked, how is trans and queer inherently tied to capitalism? There's not a single person who's getting it right. You guys are not listening to the question that I asked you. There's not like, there's literally not a single person who is listening to the question that I actually asked. Do you want to know why I stop to yell at people when they're shitposting in the chat and tell you to fucking listen? Do you want to know why I say shut the fuck up and listen over and over and over again? Because when I ask a very, 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 very simple question, people don't listen to the question I'm asking and they answer a completely different question. They answer a completely fucking different question. Okay, I'm just not going to answer the question. Maybe you guys can figure it out. None of you got the right answer, though. Literally none of you. We're moving on.
Okay, I'm gonna hope that that is close enough to me, Eric.
If you are confused, then you need to ask a question. If you are not asking a question, then your confusion is your own fucking fault. I have stopped no less than like how many fucking times to say, do you understand? Do you have questions? Do you understand? Do you have questions? And so if you're not asking questions and you're still confused, it's because you're not asking fucking questions. That is a you problem. That is not a me problem.
Thank you for your opening remarks. That was very well rehearsed. You can expect no such thing from me. I'm a high school teacher. I tend to, study improv on the side as well. So, I think I want to start with holding more space for the fact that there's not trans femme representation here. So I'm prepared to yield my time for anyone that would like to speak. Yeah,
I actually literally did answer this. I explicitly answered this, and you obviously weren't listening when I answered this, even though I know you were in the chat. I explicitly told you that gender nonconformity means not conforming to the gender binary. I also specifically told you that trans in this context, we started out the entire fucking presentation with this. I told you trans in this context does not mean transition. It means transform or transcend. So you are incorrect because you were not fucking listening, because you were shitposting in the chat. When I told you not to shitpost in the chat, I explicitly answered this and you didn't fucking hear it because you were not listening. Reagan also explicitly answered this. So you had two fucking people explicitly answer you and you still didn't fucking hear it because you weren't fucking listening. This is the point that I'm making about stop shitposting in the fucking chat. If you are shitposting, you are not listening. The point of this is to listen. It is to listen to me when I am teaching you something meticulously, saying the same thing over and over. Well, then you need to ask a fucking question. What is your question? We are stopping the entire stream just for you. Nope, I'm not. No, you have a question. You don't understand the difference. Ask a fucking question. We're not continuing until you ask questions. Stopping the entire fucking stream. We're waiting. Gender non-conformity is not conforming to the gender binary. Trans, as in transcendence, is also non-conforming to the gender binary. So there is functionally no difference between the two, and literally no one told you otherwise. No one ever said there was a difference between gender non-conformity, which means not conforming to the gender binary, and trans as in transcendence. What was said when you weren't fucking listening is that in this context, trans does not mean transition. Transition conforms to the gender binary. Transitioning from man to woman or woman, there wasn't, did I not fucking tell you to shut the fuck up and listen? Like 17 fucking times. There was not a distinction at the beginning. Why are you talking when I'm explaining the fucking concept? You know what? You're getting banned for the rest of the stream. Put in timeout for the rest of the stream. Like, I cannot. I really cannot. I cannot. 24-hour timeout. You can shut the fuck up. Trans in this context does not mean transition. Trans in this context means transform or transcend. That is because these are queer Marxists. Queer Marxists do not want people to be transitioning from man to woman or woman to man. They want them to transcend or transform gender altogether. That is what they mean by gender non-conforming. If you believe that that these people care about trans issues, as in transition from man to woman or woman to man, as in medical transition, you do not understand the different groups on the far left. These people do not care about that. These people don't even care about medicalization. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You want to know why? Because right now you are an uneducated retard who doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about because you don't know the definitions of the words. These are not arbitrary words. These are words that your little darlings are being taught in K through 12 public schools every fucking day because feckless retards like you have no fucking clue what's going on, and you send your kids to the public schools where they're literally being taught by these people. There are multiple teachers on this fucking panel right now, and you're like, I don't understand why I need to learn the definitions of these things. Guess what? Your fucking kids know the definitions of these things. The people teaching your kids know the okay. All right. You know what? You just got permanently banned from the channel, so it's not. Go away. Get the fuck out. Goodbye. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. If you want to be a retard, go be a retard somewhere else. If you want to be an ignorant loser while your kid's being queered by the public schools, go fucking do that. When your little darling comes home and tells you they need money for a sex change operation, you can look in the fucking mirror and know that it was your own fucking fault because I don't understand why I need to learn the definitions of things. Yeah, this is like Enrique Tarrio's retard audience is what's going on right now. My God. They don't. That's the answer to your question. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? We are 17 minutes into an hour-and-a-half presentation because the retards cannot rein in their retard shit. I find a brand new training on the internet that no one has seen before, and we can't even get through 20 fucking minutes of it because the retards will not stop being fucking retards. Does anyone else have anything they would like to say before we continue?
I want to start with holding more space for the fact that there's not trans femme representation
Unfucking
here.
believable.
So
Unbelievable.
I'm prepared to yield my time for anyone that would like to speak. And
Hey, Darla, thank you so much for the super chat. My grown kids stopped talking to me 1 and 4 years ago. They spoke like this before it happened with each of them. Had I known what these words meant, I might still have my kids in my life. Yeah, you want to know why? I'm so sorry that happened, Darla. You want to know why? You need to learn the language? This is why. You want to know why you take time out to shut the fuck up and listen to someone else for once in your fucking lives? Because it could literally save your relationship with your kids. Because it's important to know what's going on in the world around you. Because it's important to know what your taxes are paying for. These are people in taxpayer-funded positions. Because you want to know why this ideology has been in public schools for years and years and years and years and years? Because conservative retards refused to listen. You know, I've been going through this historical stuff that I got in San Francisco, because for people who don't know, I got a whole bunch of old historical documents in San Francisco about trans liberation, queer liberation, gay liberation. This is shit from like the 70s. I've been going through some of these documents. Literally, these people have been saying the same fucking thing since the 70s. They've been saying the same thing since the 70s. At least. And no one bothered to listen. They were putting this in the public schools in the 70s. And no one bothered to listen. So you want to know why I yell at people who aren't fucking listening? It's because I am so fucking sick of seeing how long this has been in the public sphere, funded by our taxpayer dollars, and literally all people had to do was shut the fuck up and listen to what was being said to understand what was going on, and they refused to do it for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. It is infuriating. It is infuriating how these people have had total carte blanche to operate completely in the public, most of them funded by our fucking taxes, and conservatives who claim to be fighting communism can't sit the fuck down and listen to a presentation for more than 15 minutes because it's hard, it's boring, I don't understand, why do I even have to do this? Why are you being so mean? Why are you yelling at me? I don't understand why I have to learn these words. This is boring. Why do we have to do this? Why are you so... It is fucking mind-bogglingly infuriating. You want to know why the left is winning? Because the right fucking allowed it. Now shut the fuck up and listen. For once. Please.
could frame that perspective here and now. That's a large and spontaneous ask. I recognize that, but please know that the space is yours. You know, as a high school teacher, I also am primarily dealing in matters of rupture and repair. Right? I'm not a teacher of content so much as a facilitator of social interaction. I'm there to model for them what it looks like to be a human being that has a capacity to learn, which is an innate state of being within all of us. You know, it is also my charge as a trans person to represent to them in their day-to-day life an experience that may mirror their own. And if it doesn't, an experience that deserves to be mingled with and cherished and learned from. It is not a mystery to us in this room that education has long been a tool for ideological indoctrination. one of Vermont's shortcomings is its hubris around this matter.
Oh,
thinking
yeah?
itself to be immune from these effects. I suppose I could highlight for you in this moment, right, a few instances that suggest that Vermont is not willing to stand up for its transgender students.
What?
So we have recently come into having a Secretary of Education, Zoe Saunders, who has been relocated from Florida, where she worked for Broward County School District, serving in a role that was basically that of agent of school closure and consolidation. Since then, she has brought forth the same manifest to our state and has publicly admitted to be willing to engage with the Trump administration with regards to their
so real music
disseminating anti-trans content. There was a probe earlier this year that asked schools to sign on to compliance with the Trump definition of DEI or, seek losing support under the Title VI domain. Okay. It took us, I have to be so close about, I can't say any cuss words on TV. I don't know. What is it, the George Carlin? What is the 13? I don't know. Anyway, so the point being that it took our Attorney General and the Agency of Education way too long to shut down that probe, right? One that was legally faulty from the get. It took.
Are you telling me that the person in charge of education in Vermont was forced into shutting down an affirmation that people were going to comply with the Trump administration's executive orders? Probably by the teachers' unions? Is that what I just heard? This is why we shut the fuck up and listen to the left instead of whining and bitching and complaining and fucking moaning about how bored we fucking are, because we just learned from this teacher that the Department of Education in Vermont was asking schools to say, yes, we will go along with these executive orders of the Trump administration. And then apparently at some point, the Department of Education in Vermont was forced to shut that down, probably by the fucking teachers union, which is what I told Harmeet Dillon was going to happen earlier this year. And Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General of the United States, completely ignored every single fucking clip that I sent her, saying over and over again, Vermont's rebelling, Vermont's rebelling, the entire fucking state of Vermont is rebelling. I've been covering this shit all year. You can go back and watch several streams, mostly from the fucking Tempest Collective, because they've been involved in the organizing of all this shit, where I said over and over and over again, the schools in Vermont are rebelling against the Trump administration's executive orders. They're talking about it on video. They're not going to comply with them. This is an entire statewide thing that's led by the fucking teachers union. Harmeet Dillon ignored every fucking clip I sent her when she's the one that's supposed to be in charge of the DEI shit. And now we're hearing from a teacher in Vermont public schools, a fucking trans Marxist teacher, that's saying we forced the Department of Education in Vermont to shut this down. Yeah. Well, that's typical.
It took us, I have to be so close about, I can't say any cuss words on TV. I don't know. What is it, the George Carlin? What is the 13? I don't know. Anyway, so the point being that it took our Attorney General and the Agency of Education way too long to shut down that probe, right? One that was legally faulty from the get.
Mm-hmm.
It took too much convincing, right? They continued to make these, employ these ideological structure tests, right? They then went after us again and said, well, if you don't pull gender-based content from your curricula, particularly in the domains of like health and sexual education, then you will lose funding. Okay. The Vermont education system is very sensitive to funding at the moment. We don't have enough of it. Okay. And we're currently in the process of attempting to renegotiate how money is spent on public education in the state, right, with Act 73, which is not a good job. Okay. That was done with haste, and it represents another faulty attempt by the legislature to repair a broken funding formula. It is a shame that we have made education something to be contingent upon funding, right? It is a shame that we made people believe that they have a choice in educating their children. Okay, so in the face of all of this, right, there's so many levels of scale that are being impacted, which is why I sort of came into this talk not having anything put together, because it's so overwhelming and I want to be responsive to your questions. Okay. But in our attempt to try and save what education system we have left, districts are scrambling to pull the levers they have on a local level to preserve their school systems, okay? Which means cutting personnel, right? That's our only lever on the local level. And when we cut personnel, right, we are typically cutting personnel that represent our most diverse intersections, because we are seen as expendable. And that perpetuates harm, because then my students don't interact with people like me, or my Black coworkers, or my disabled coworkers, and they are again alienated from their right to an emancipatory education. I sit at a sort of interesting intersection in that I am a laborer, like I'm a childcare laborer, which I think more high school teachers would be better off sort of seeing themselves in, right? Like the reality is that we're in the business of caretaking human beings, right? At a very, very vulnerable and impressionable part of their lives. Okay, we seed within them the lenses that they will then look at the world through. Okay, I mean, that is sacred. That's sacred. So that is part of my work, is like deconstructing the violence on a curricular level, right? I'm a biology teacher. I could get into all the specifics there. Biology is not binary.
Excuse me. Biology is not binary. Okay.
Through. Okay. I mean, that is sacred. That's sacred. So that is part of my work, is like deconstructing the violence on a curricular level, right? I'm a biology teacher. I could get into all the specifics there. Biology is not binary. But you know, I'm also a laborer, right? Like I'm a union worker, and I believe that the Vermont Teachers Association leaves much to be desired in the way of a political voice. We are the largest union in the state, and we're tepid on most important issues.
I got that biology is not binary thing.
And so we are not standing in solidarity with our other workers. And so there's much room here to foster a cross-sector collaboration. And so I kind of want to just like wrap up here, because I could drone, with some words by Leslie Feinberg. Okay. I think it can be sort of abstract to wrap your head around how transgenderism and, you know, laborism intersect, Like that's
Huh.
kind of like, I don't know. It misses people unless delineated very clearly, right? But transgenderism is a threat to capitalism, which is why we're scapegoated, right? Because we do not rely on the same systems of consumption that fuel that beast, right? Our very state of being has had to beget relational ingenuity, right? Or just ingenuity on all fronts. So we don't actually need that system, which is why we are so very threatening. Okay? It's because
This is a Marxist. Marxists are interested in the class war, bourgeois versus proletariat, capitalist versus worker, owner versus worker. That's what they're talking about.
we are a threat to the bottom line, lest we forget. So give me 1 second, because I'm going to pull this up and it's going to be worth it. So here we go. I'll spare you the background information on Leslie Feinberg. You can do that research on your own. I do have a few copies of her work, Transgender Liberation, where she, more eloquently than I, makes the connection between Marxism and transgenderism. So here we go. Many people think that all masculine women are lesbian and all feminine men are gay. That is a misunderstanding. Not all lesbians and gay men are cross-gendered. Not all transgendered women and men are lesbians or gay. Transgendered people are mistakenly viewed as the cusp of the lesbian and gay community. In reality, the two huge communities.
I'm a big tough man and I signed up for the military. These people aren't going to win over my dead body. These people are going to win. And I don't care if you call me a retard. Do you even understand your enemy? Oh, permanently ban you? So you're such a big tough man and you signed up for the military, but you're going to come and harass a woman that's trying to teach people about the far left? Are you fucking stupid? I've got 47 accounts I'm going to harass you with when you permanently ban this one. You care so much about defeating the far left that you are putting your energy into harassing me and disrupting my fucking class for your fucking feelings. You care so much about the far left that you can't sit down and shut the fuck up and learn. But what you're going to do is you're come and harass me and disrupt my stream with your 47 accounts. You don't care about shit except yourself and your own fucking feelings. This is your typical fucking conservative right here. These commies are never going to win 100 million. And then what do they put their energy into? Do they put their energy into understanding the left? Do they put their energy into understanding the enemy? Or do they come in and go, oh, you're not going to do this, I'm going to harass you with my 47 accounts until you give me what I wanted. Well, how pathetic are these fucking people? How fucking pathetic. How fucking pathetic.
Communities are like the circles that only partially overlap. While the oppressions within these two powerful communities are not the same, we face a common enemy. Gender phobia, like racism, sexism, and bigotry against lesbians and gay men, is meant to keep us divided. Unity can only increase our strength. Solidarity is built on understanding how and why oppression exists and who profits from it. It is our view that revolutionary changes in human society can do away with inequity, bigotry, and intolerance.
That means overthrowing
In
capitalism.
the spirit of building that fighting movement, we offer this view of the sweeping patterns in history, the commonality of women and men who have walked the path of the, I don't even know what this word is. Someone help me. Berdache. Verdache. Thank you. I learned something today. Of the transgendered. Walk that road, whether we were held in high esteem or reviled. Look at us. We are battling for survival. Listen, we are struggling to be heard. We are fighting for a better world. The institutionalized bigotry and oppression we face today have not always existed. They arose with the division of a society into exploiter and exploited. Divide and conquer tactics have allowed the slave owners, feudal landlords, and corporate ruling classes to
Feudal.
keep for themselves the lion's share of the wealth created by the laboring class. Like racism and all forms of prejudice, bigotry towards transgendered people is a deadly carcinogen. We are pitted against each other in order to keep us from seeing each other as allies. Genuine bonds of solidarity can be forged between people who respect each other's differences and are willing to fight their enemy together. We are the class that does the work of the world and can revolutionize it. We can win true liberation. The struggle against intolerable conditions is on the rise around the world. And the militant role of transgendered women, men, and youth in today's fight is already helping shape the future. Thank you.
Well, now I feel bad for going last because these two are great and I feel inexperienced. Okay. So I am Ambrose. I'm a junior at University of Vermont, but I'm also a military brat and a transfer student to UVM. And in my bio, I did put wanting a community that's not just tolerating or accepting. I put the fact that I wanted a community that is empowering. Background on me, I come from military family, but they were tolerant. I wouldn't even say as much as accepting until fairly recently. Came out to my parents multiple times, and the only time they ever considered the idea that I was trans was whenever I was having a breakdown after therapy. That's whenever they acknowledged even though I came out to my mom 3 times, dad multiple times. And when I came out to my dad the final time, I remember him mentioning the most recent school shooter was trans, which is not a really good thing to hear. And whenever I asked him, who does the majority of school shootings, he walked away. So that was interesting. But part of my issues with the concept of tolerating and empowering is tolerating can be, oh, I use your name, I use your pronouns, but you are still wrong. That is leaning more towards accepting, but not empowering. And part of the issues that I've had with my own experiences is this idea, not just with my family, but with even leftist spaces, is the idea of, oh, I don't see gender because I use they, them for everyone, but then you realize they only use they, them for either femme people or people they generally just don't know. That has been issues that I've experienced, but it's gotten so bad recently that, I mean, when Leah Smith, so context, I am with an organization called Trans Plus. We are a college student-led group of trans individuals basically host socials, host events such as socials to like empower our community and make us feel actually wanted, because that's something I personally have struggled with, moving around a lot. And we were just discussing actually if Trans Plus wanted to make a statement on Leah Smith and how, because there's this idea that when someone passes and there's this thought of, should this be politicized? And one thing that I need people to understand is her death is politicized, but her identity before she died was also politicized. Mm-hmm. That is a fact. There's this idea that not everything is about politics. I don't know what bathroom to use because I'm scared of going into the men's restroom and getting hate crimed. And then I'm also scared of going to the women's because I know I make people uncomfortable. Either way, I make someone uncomfortable. UVM is kind of nice. We do have gender neutral bathrooms in majority of our buildings, but there are times where we don't have them. And sometimes I do just hold it until I get somewhere where I could, which is not healthy. Don't recommend. But Trans Plus was created to make the space that we need, that I at least need. I want a space where I can talk about issues, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, but overall we made it so we could feel like we belong somewhere without having to worry, oh, will I make XYZ uncomfortable? whenever we were discussing making the statement, no one wanted to really do it because
you.
it was difficult to acknowledge. Well, not acknowledge, but to word it in a way. I ended up being tasked with making that statement on Leah Smith. I wanted to emphasize just queer resources in Vermont.
This is a good note for people who might not know. Leah Smith was an American student at Middlebury College who died by suicide on October 18, 2025 at the age of 21. She was reported missing by her father. It was a trans student who committed suicide at Middlebury College. Middlebury College, for people who don't know, is a very, very, very bougie, very expensive college in Vermont. And it's very it's like elite to get into.
But the actual statement, I did have to work longer than I would normally do just because it is something.
But they're also very
an
leftist,
act
like
that I have
extremely
myself considered in the
leftist.
past multiple times due to the politicization of who I am. But using that, knowing that my identity, and I've been out for years, knowing that my identity is politicized has radicalized me. I am thankful that I have the support system I have today.
Thank you.
I operate within
Appreciate
UVM
it.
grounds with as well as off campus with organizations such as Democratic Socialists of America. I've been active within them actually since 2021. And the reason I got interested in socialism itself is purely because I didn't like how my dad talked about people of color, and he said McDonald's workers shouldn't have a living wage, and I was like, wait, but don't they need to live? I was in 8th grade. That was kind of like, I didn't see that as, I've seen healthcare and education as basic necessities. And I remember growing up, I thought everyone had that. As a military child, I had accessible education, like with pre-K, because the base offers it. I had accessible healthcare. I didn't have to worry, oh, I have a doctor's appointment. That's okay. I don't have to worry about the bill afterwards. And then I moved to southeastern New Mexico, and I was hearing that people were too scared, or they chose not to go to the doctor because of the bills. And I was like, wait, why? And then I learned I was very sheltered growing up, and things I thought were basic necessities in America are not. My father, fairly recently, like a little less than a month ago, voiced, why are you against the system that gives you these benefits? And I told him, I think these should not be benefits. I think these should be necessities that everyone gets. Healthcare, education, and there's always the talk of, oh, what is healthcare? And under my insurance, it's always what is needed to live, meaning if I'm bleeding on the street, then yeah, insurance will cover it. HRT? No. I was told by my parents due to their, like I said, tolerating but not empowering, I'm not allowed to use insurance for my HRT, which people may know this, but if you don't, HRT is really expensive, especially if you're paying out of pocket. But a lot of the places I go to pick up that prescription do give me a nice coupon, so I don't have to pay the $150 per too much. But my parents first said I was not allowed to use the insurance. Not that the insurance wouldn't cover it, but I just wasn't allowed because it was against their moral beliefs. I started organizing. I got really involved here in Vermont after I left Texas because I wanted not just a community where I could be trans, but a community that has movements in terms of we are progressing towards a place where we don't have to worry about people going hungry, people living on the street. I'm tired of people complaining about the homeless situation.
This is basically the answer to the question that I asked earlier that no one got right because no one listened to the question that I actually asked. And what people did instead was repeated the talking points that they've heard. But they weren't the correct talking points because it wasn't answering the question that I asked. Hang on a sec. I asked earlier, what is the connection between trans/queer, what we're watching now, and capitalism? What I was told was they want to abolish the gender binary and the nuclear family to abolish capitalism. That was not the question that I asked. The question that I asked is, what is the connection between trans/queer and capitalism? The answer is that they are part of an oppressed class that is oppressed by capitalism. That the goal is not to create. This is important to understand because these are militant queer Marxists. I'm literally answering the fucking question for you right now. Shut the fuck up and listen. These are militant queer Marxists. This is the danger when conservative retards conflate every single trans person with far left activism. There are many, 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 many people that are trans, as in transition from man to woman or woman to man, that are not far left queer militant activists. This is not about whether or not you are transitioning from being a man to woman or woman to man, because that has nothing to do with what these people are doing. What these people are doing is trying to overthrow the capitalist system to implement a far left political agenda that is grounded in Marxism, or what they would call equity, which is making sure people have all the access to all of the resources. This is why they're talking about free healthcare. This is why they're talking about public education, compulsory public education, no private schools, no homeschooling. When it comes to healthcare, no private doctors, no private insurance. They want to overthrow the capitalist system and replace it with Marxism. That is what they are doing. In order to do that, you must understand that they view being trans or queer or whatever they're calling themselves as an oppressed class under capitalism. The goal is not to have equal rights for people. That's not what it is. The goal is to abolish the capitalist system that is oppressing them and everyone else. Does everyone understand what I just explained? Because, again, literally, there was not a single person in the chat who got the question right earlier. Not one single person. And the reason the people didn't get the question right is because people did not listen to the question that I asked. This is not about being treated well. This is not about equal rights. This is only and exclusively about the capitalist system. That's it.
Be trans, but community that has movements in terms of we are progressing towards a place where we don't have to worry about people going hungry, people living on the street. I'm tired of people complaining about the homeless situation. Mm-hmm. You complain, but all you do is want to ban the places they go. That is not solving. It isn't. In New Mexico, I helped with a fundraiser for Casa Q.
This person is not talking about how do we create equal rights or a more fair environment for people like me. This person is talking about how do we create an environment where everyone has free housing, free education, free healthcare, all the resources that you could ever want available on demand, everything free, available to everyone. That is Marxism, guys. That's Marxism. It's not about being treated fairly. It's not about identity politics. These people don't play identity politics. We talked about that earlier. This is only and exclusively about overthrowing the capitalist system. That's why this person is talking more about socialism and communism than they are about being trans. See, this is what we call a conservative retard right here. I don't understand why you're promoting these retards. You're giving these people publicity. They're playing their games and learning their definitions. You are only justifying their actions. This is the type of retard that sent their kids to public schools and didn't understand what the public schools were teaching. And then their little darlings came home and declared they were trans, and this person had no idea what was going on because this person never bothered to listen to the left. Bro, you're not smart enough to be in my chat. Permanently banned. Goodbye. Go away. And that is why these people have gotten away with what they're doing for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. Because conservative retards think it's noble to not listen to what they're actually saying. Support for our favorite doctor. Hey, thanks so much for the support. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know. Like, where the fuck are all the retards coming from today? There's been a lot of retards in the chat today.
An LGBTQ homeless shelter. And I mentioned it to my parents because I was like, oh, this is a really cool thing I'm pursuing with with my local YDSA high school chapter. Well, my dad asked what if there was a cis straight homeless shelter that only had cis straight people? And I told him, are people getting kicked out for being cis or straight? Also, technically, they cannot turn people away at the homeless shelter. It is just catered towards them. Like that is, but he did not like that idea of having a place that is protecting people who were turned away because of who they are. Everything's politicized these days. I cannot stress that enough.
Everything is politicized.
Earlier this fall, Trump pushed universities to sign a compact, which would give them federal benefits, money, and all the university had to do is sign a compact that says we will teach what the federal government values and prioritize that. That is, I mean, he's already stepping into fascism, but that is a step very far into fascism. Trying to buy our universities. Well, yes, UVM did not sign or was not asked to sign that compact. UVM still does nothing. We have no safety right now.
Wait, what? Hang on. What? UVM was not asked to sign on to the Trump administration policies?
To do is sign a compact that says we will teach what the federal government values and prioritize that. That is, I mean, he's already stepping into fascism, but that is a step very far into fascism. Trying to buy our universities. Well, yes, UVM did not sign or was not asked to sign that compact. UVM still does nothing. We have no safety right now. UVM's administration wants to throw their hands in the way and be like, well, we have been attacked, so we're just going to keep quiet. They do not want to defend us until we are attacked. While UVM does offer HRT through their student health insurance, my parents said no to that as well, so that's cool. Yeah, but there is a concern being voiced within my circles of, will the student health insurance take away my HRT? And when these concerns are raised to administration, they still were like, well, if we're quiet, maybe we'll get by. Mm-hmm. If you do not have policies codified, whether that is protecting our queer or trans community, whether that is protecting students of color, students who are immigrants, international students, there are no codified policies right now. Mm-hmm. There isn't, because the university wants to be as quiet as possible. Mm-hmm. But what happens when my friends get stopped at the border and get sent back to where they're from? What happens when my friends get detained by ICE? I have a friend in New Hampshire whose family member was detained by ICE.
Oh no!
ICE facilities. Who knows? They don't want to tell us. They don't want to acknowledge what is being done, the inhumane treatments. I know folks, like I said, in New Hampshire, who have family members who are detained. I know Migrant Justice has made multiple initiatives because of so many farm workers and so many workers in general, people who are getting detained by ICE. I want policies. I want them codified. I don't want like simple in passing, like, oh yeah, we support you. Actions will always speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. These liberal institutions want to only get defensive after they are attacked. That will be our downfall. I want a space to be able to be safe, whether that's going to the bathroom, walking down the street, not just if you're queer or trans, but if you're a person of color, if you're an immigrant. I don't think waiting to be attacked is a good idea. I mean, that's should be inherently. I want there to be attention. I want policies to be codified across the board. Waiting till you are attacked you will be the loser in that situation. Stop being quiet. And I mean, I'm directing this one at University of Vermont. Stop being quiet. Codify and protect your fucking community. Thank you.
That person is a problem. That person is a militant queer activist.
So again, a big thank you to our speakers. I feel like I learned a lot. I'm inspired, and I think we all have probably a lot that we want to share and questions that we want to ask as well. One thing to think about before the discussion starts, we have our local community access representative here who's filming. During the discussion, if you would prefer not to be captured on the video, you can probably move much closer to where the camera is. Yeah, or you could just wave. So I'll keep the speakers list. We're basically going to have several questions or comments at a time. Then we'll hear from the speakers and then go back to more questions and comments and so on. So we have about 40 minutes for the
Codify means make it a policy or a law.
And if you raise a hand, I'll keep a list of people who want to speak.
Means put it in code, like put it into like the policy code or whatever.
Ambrose, if we could, I'd like to maybe if you could give us more specifics about how you're connected. I'm sure you are other people in the trans community at UVM. The word that we get from
I just want to note, I told you guys this was the most Vermont thing ever, and this is like a meeting in some sort of like old schoolhouse or something, and I told you none of the chairs were going to be the same. Did I not say this? I know I've been yelling a lot, but can we just reflect on the fact that I told you that none of the chairs in the room were going to be the same, because this is the most Vermont fucking meeting ever that's been, and I say that as someone who grew up in Vermont. None of the fucking chairs are the same. Everyone's wearing flannel. None of the chairs are the same. They're in some 150-year-old schoolhouse. Called it. I know my state, man. I know my state well, okay?
Administration in terms of like changing the names of all the identity centers and put them under this heading like the multiculturalism. I just actually heard a presentation by the director of that office who said that, you know, the kids in the trans community are fine with it. There's no issue anymore. That there was some uproar at the beginning. People were uncomfortable with the change. They didn't understand where it was coming from, but now that they've gotten more information, they are okay with it. And I just would like to know if you see it that way. Like how do you feel about that?
Can I have a direct comment or do I wait? Okay. So less than a week ago, me and two other trans individuals were actually talking about this, on how we still are upset. It is just, we called attention to it whenever it initially happened, whenever they merged PRISM, our former LGBTQ resource center, under the multicultural center now, I guess is what it's called. That happened technically over the summer. Students were actually, the majority of students weren't here. There was uproar, but I would like to acknowledge that, again, the university did nothing, so students are fighting these fights, trying to advocate for ourselves. The university is making it seem like it's a waste of our time because they will refuse to listen to us. That is what's going on. We are not comfortable. University just doesn't want to listen to us, and that is, renaming it isn't as big of a deal in terms of they still do provide the resources, but we are being super cautious. We are keeping an eye because this is a step to do more than just that. It is merging them is a step towards getting rid of them completely. It is a step towards putting, it's like a baby step, you know, like, oh, let's see what we can get now, and then eventually we'll go bigger. Yeah. So right now it's just university doesn't want to listen to us because they didn't the first time. They didn't listen to us. We need to pick our fights, and we're trying to be strategic about it. But we are also uncomfortable still.
Other thoughts, hands, questions?
I'm curious about if anyone could speak to, I've just really been reflecting a lot on the sort of eventuality of our illegality. And I guess I'm really curious about your thoughts about how we organize in our illegality.
So if people couldn't hear that because it's a little bit soft, the person said, I'm just thinking about the eventuality of our illegality. So basically the question is, like, they're saying, we know they're going to make trans people illegal. So how do we organize against the evil fascists trying to make us illegal?
And how we shift away from the thrall that we are into the state. That's what I got. If you can try, but it's just something that I'm just chewing on so much.
I do want to say this is an open discussion, so even if it is not us three, y'all can also answer that. I want audience.
No
input.
hierarchy.
Just putting that out there as well.
That's why they're having audience answer,
It's
no
like
hierarchy.
super cynical, but it just feels real, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts about it.
I tend to be, at least when the school year is in session, a little hyper focused.
Okay. These people believe that gender is not a biological reality. They believe that gender are socially constructed categories created by capitalism in order to reinforce capitalist cultural norms. They said this earlier. These people do not believe that gender is biological. Gender is a category. It is an identity category that was created by capitalism in order to put some people in powerful positions and some people in oppressed positions. That's it.
On the local. And I just want to maybe throw out some numbers of concern for you. So again, Eric very clearly outlined for us that protecting our vulnerable populations is at odds with capital acquisition. Like, that's the fight we're in. So the way that I see it play out in my sphere of education, right, is that we have a primary funding base that is dependent on property taxes. And that is problematic for a variety of reasons. One, the state doesn't have a complete census of secondary and tertiary home ownership, so they cannot differentially tax them. That's hilarious. Two, it's not income sensitive enough.
Yep.
Right. So yeah. So budgets do reflect values, right? Okay. So schools need to be crafting budgets that protect resources that are utilized by marginalized students, but they're not crafting budgets that do that. There's a unique opportunity here for public participation in school budget crafting and school budget passing. Your school budget is put to vote every year. And, not to the same degree that we see things like municipal budgets.
Okay. No one asked what you believe. No one literally cares what you believe. What we are doing, and I cannot believe I have to explain this again for the 5th or 6th time on this fucking stream. What we are doing is understanding what they believe. What you believe does not fucking matter. Your eyes do not fucking matter. What matters is, are you listening and understanding what they believe? That is the point of this exercise. If you can't wrap your head around the concept, then you might not be smart enough to be here.
School budgets are failing more and more each year. So the reason that is also scary is the voter turnout is poor. So we have 18,000 plus registered voters in South Burlington, and our school budget was decided by less than 4,000 people. A $76 million budget was passed on the 3rd try by like a margin of less than 100 votes. So I'm telling you right now, like it's a room full of people that are deciding, like straight up in this state, like just like disgruntled, like if you get like 76 disgruntled enough people on like
that's
town
actually
meeting
true.
day, that budget's
That's
gonna
true.
fail, and that means like our last Black guidance counselor is gone. And
That'd be too bad.
The sort of snowball of harm thereafter is hard to calculate. But when that keeps happening, when they keep just like siphoning away, like chiseling away our resources year after year after year, it's becoming more and more obvious what they're attempting to shape the public school system here into as like a large scale dissemination tool. That's why they want to consolidate all of us. That's why they want to do away with collective bargaining, right? Like this is another power grab. Okay. So we have to turn more people out for school budget votes. Okay. And we also have to like stick it to Act 73. Schools need to preferentially opt not to consolidate, right? Because there was just a commission put together to try and redraw the maps, right? And the commission basically failed to report and was like, this will be detrimental to the education system at large. Okay, so like there are like really hyper local things that we can do. Another one is we got to start shelling out the money. We have got to start being more careful about what we invest in. And that takes work, and you all are positioned well to do that work. Do it. It's hard, but we have to be funding, right, the livelihoods of our trans siblings through mutual aid endeavors.
Oh!
These are like sort of my
We have to be funding the livelihoods of our trans siblings, by which they mean queer, through our mutual aid efforts. Because mutual aid is how these people are funded. They are not funded by Soros. They are funded by mutual aid.
hyper local thoughts. And so I'll turn it over to maybe some, again, different levels of scale here.
Yeah, I like that question, man. I like the focus on resources, because I think that we're talking about the expansion of like an impending expansion of illegality on trans. There's already plenty even within Vermont, right? When you go into DOC, your PO or judge decides whether you're allowed to.
I want to point this out too. Someone said this in the chat earlier. If you saw this guy in the orange flannel walking down the street, if you saw this guy in the black and white flannel walking down the street, probably if you saw this old guy in the background if you saw most of the people in this room walking down the street, you would not know that they are radical leftists. Okay, the guy in the keffiyeh is giving it away. We know he's a leftist because he's wearing a keffiyeh, fine. But if you saw that big guy in the orange with the beard, you wouldn't know he's a far leftist. If you saw that guy that's just wearing a flannel and fucking jeans and he looks totally normal, you wouldn't know he was a fucking leftist. If you saw most of the people in this room, you would not know they were fucking leftists. This is why we don't judge people by their looks. This is why we don't come in and go, they've got crazy eyes, or they've got pink hair, they dye their hair, they must be a leftist. You don't know.
Go into a prison that, or go into a facility that matches your gender identity. It's the decisions on you. It's for the safety of the facility who you feel threatening towards the COs and inmates there. And if you have enough money with increased SNAP benefits to pay for increased healthcare premiums in order to remain trans, the cost of being trans is very high, and it's always been for poor queer people, being trans is a privilege. And so I guess my question is, like, it's for me, and I work with a lot of folks, especially since the Pride Center closed. We've taken over HIV testing at a social work agency, which I don't know what it's named because I'm getting in trouble. But but what I've heard from folks who are both on the precipice of being failed workers and failed human beings, discarded human beings, bodies are no good, all wrong gender, and all wrong as workers, unemployed. They're not fit to work, disability here and there. They're not making enough money to afford rent, so then they can't afford clothes, so then they can't keep a job. These failures of people that the system wants to convince us exist, who are, I think, very convinced that their liberation is something that's on the precipice. How do we work with them? Because there's the labor movement has a huge history of failure at successfully integrating with the folks that it's seeking to mobilize. I think with Black workers, that's like a common thing. But then also, Black workers have been some of the most successful, strikers have been some of the labor movement is alight with them. So that's got to be true for our queer folks and broken bodies. And it feels also like Vermont is kind of min-maxed in terms of recognition versus redistribution. We're really good at that. So partially in my head, I know that at union meetings, I could see in Vermont, even in the most conservative unions, that maybe pronouns are being respected. But I doubt that is actually what leads to the meaningful integration.
Even in conservative meetings in Vermont, pronouns are being respected.
Of queerness as a wedge issue in union fights and for just for the rank and file workers in general. So I guess what is the thing that lets us lead queerness into the union space and also just into the worker space?
Yeah, I think that, Vivon, that's really an important question. And I was partially thinking about the question that you raised. And I think what the beginning of it is just analytically understanding how directly connected.
No. This is a conservative retard take. Karlyn, eventually mutual aid comes from George Soros. George Soros, you just need to follow the chain up, Karlyn, because mutual aid, that is a conservative retard take. That is not what mutual aid is. There is no chain to follow up. There is no fucking hierarchy. That is the point. There is no head of the snake that is obviously George Soros that you can just lob off. It is so fucking stupid.
Billionaire clique in the White House is to a gendered class war, and we have to put all of that together.
Yeah, all these guys are funded. These fucking people are having a meeting in a 150-year-old schoolhouse, probably with no heat, where they all have different fucking chairs and they all have like very basic shit. This is all funded by George Soros, guys. This is funded by George Soros. This is what George Soros funding. They're writing their fucking signs on cardboard in a fucking marker, and that's what George Soros is funding. Like conservatives are so fucking stupid.
is to privatize and deregulate absolutely everything and do what? Put it all on the shoulders of private individuals and especially the family to take care of all the social provisioning, healthcare, education, social services, everything that they want to abolish. They want to abolish all that stuff, state programs, and put that on the shoulders of the family. And that's where the nexus of trans oppression gets ramped up and women's oppression gets ramped up. Because who's going to be doing all that social provisioning is the privatized nuclear family with clear gender roles. Men, women, 2 kids, a yard. That's their fantasy at odds with the reality of what.
The privatized nuclear family with clear gender roles. Gotta clip the. Let's gonna get to the start of this guy's talk.
Is the thing that lets us lead queerness into the union space and also just into the worker space.
Yeah, I think that, Vivon, that's really an important question. And I was partially thinking about the question that you raised. And I think what the beginning of it is just analytically understanding how directly connected the billionaire clique in the White House is to a gendered class war. And we have to put all of that together. Think about their obsession is to privatize and deregulate absolutely everything and do what? Put it all on the shoulders of private individuals and especially the family to take care of all the social provisioning, healthcare, education, social services, everything that they want to abolish. They want to abolish all that stuff, state programs, and put that on the shoulders of the family. And that's where the nexus of trans oppression gets ramped up and women's oppression gets ramped up. Because who's going to be doing all that social provisioning is the privatized nuclear family with clear gender roles. Men, women, 2 kids, a yard. That's their fantasy at odds with the reality of what people live. And so what that does is help explain why the attack on trans people is an attack on the entire working class and what's left of our social provisioning, healthcare, education, etc. And I think what Eric gave as an example of that USDA totally summarizes that in bullet point form, how the gendered class war is being carried out. And I think the stuff that VSWU, the Vermont School Workers United, has done is an example of exactly what we need to do, which is to organize the ranks of trade unionists around demands of oppression. Immigrants, trans people, as part of the broader class fight to redistribute money from above to these social institutions. And that's a winning argument that most people will agree with, that we should tax the rich to pay for better education, healthcare. Everybody agrees with that in the working class because people despise what is going on. So I think there's a big opening to integrate all of this, but it's not easy. It takes politics, organization, and I'll just, the one other thing is that this is demands on the state to do different things than what they want to do, which they want to jail, deport, kill, and we want to educate, take care of the homeless, take care of the sick, etc., and liberate people. But we want to make demands on the state as transitional to fighting for a whole different kind of society, because the transphobia and sexism and racism and xenophobia is baked into capitalism. It's inextricable. So each fight, we have to keep our eyes on that much bigger prize. Win a reform, and then always ask for more.
I'm actually going to call on myself next because I've
That was I was in my head. I was in my head. I was going, say capitalism, say capitalism, say capitalism, say capitalism. Wow. Okay, we're going to go back. We're going to listen to this again. We're going to break it down. We're going to break down what this old guy just said. Because he just said a lot. He just said a lot. Okay, hang on.
Important question, and I was partially thinking about the question that you raised, and I think what the beginning of it is just analytically understanding how directly connected the billionaire clique in the White House is to a gendered class war. And we have to put all of that together.
The Trump administration's executive orders are eliciting a gender class war. Gender and class are the same thing because for them, because remember, gender are socially constructed categories created by capitalism where some people are oppressors and other people are oppressed. That's what he means when he says the gender class war.
Together. Think about their obsession is to privatize and deregulate absolutely everything and do what? Put it all on.
When they say capitalism, they mean private property ownership. That's why he's using the word privatize, 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 privatize. Communists are against privatization. They believe that all bourgeois property, housing, apartment rentals wouldn't exist, land, private businesses, intellectual property, parental rights over your kids. They believe that all private bourgeois property should be available to everyone. So no one owns homes, no one owns lands, no one owns apartment rentals and are landlords, no one owns intellectual property, no one owns private businesses, whether or not they're big or small. No one has parental rights over your kids because the kids belong to the collective. So that's why he keeps saying privatize over and over and over again. When he's saying privatize, he's referencing capitalism.
On the shoulders of private individuals and especially the family to take care of all the social provisioning, healthcare, education, social services, everything that they.
Part of the problem that the left has with the nuclear family, they have several grievances, but in this case, what people need to understand is they're saying that in the private nuclear family, you have access to the resources that your family has access to. So some families have more money than other families. Some people have more land than other families. Some people have more resources than other families. And what they're saying is that inequity creates oppression because it creates hierarchies where some people have access to better healthcare than other people. Some people have access to better education than other people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all based on the family that you are born into. That is part of the reason why they want to abolish the nuclear family, because they believe that all things should be available collectively to all people.
Want to abolish. They want to abolish all that stuff. State programs and put that on the shoulders of the family. And that's where the nexus of trans oppression gets ramped up and women's oppression gets ramped up. Because who's going to be doing all that social provisioning is the privatized nuclear family with clear gender roles. Men, women, 2 kids, a yard. That's their fantasy.
That's the patriarchy.
The reality of what people live. And so what that does is help explain why the attack on trans people is an attack on the entire working class and what's left of our social provisioning, healthcare, education, etc. And I think
Okay,
that Eric-
well, actually, to be very clear, no one gives a flying fuck what you think. What we are doing is listening to them explain what they think. So if you're not interested in listening to them explain what they think because you have fucking feelings about it, no one fucking cares what you think. Your opinion does not matter. The point is to understand them. So shut the fuck up and listen.
Gave as an example of that USDA totally summarizes that in bullet point form, how the gender class war is being carried out. And I think the stuff that VSWU, the Vermont School Workers United, has done is an example of exactly
Vermont
what we
School
need
Workers
to do,
United.
which is to organize the ranks of trade unionists around demands of oppression. Immigrants, trans people, as part of the broader class fight to redistribute money from above to these social institutions. And that's a winning argument that most people will agree with, that we should tax the rich to pay for better education, healthcare. Everybody agrees with that in the working class because people despise what is going on. So I think there's a big opening to integrate.
Oh, hey, Goro, for $5 over on Rumble. I do appreciate that. Sorry, I didn't see it earlier. My bad.
Integrate all of this, but it's not easy. It takes politics, organization, and I'll just, the one other thing is that this is demands on the state to do different things than what they want to do, which they want to jail, deport, kill. and we want to educate, take care of the homeless, take care of the sick, etc., and liberate people. But we want to make demands on the state as transitional to fighting for a whole different kind of society.
That means
Because the
communism.
transphobia and sexism and racism and xenophobia is baked into capitalism. It's inextricable. So each fight, we have to keep our eyes on that much bigger prize. Win a reform, and then always ask for more.
I'm actually going to call on myself next because I've been thinking about what you said a lot. And in addition to attempting to make trans folks illegal, I also, oh, sorry, the microphone. The Trump administration is also trying to terrify people out of existence, right? So like I'm a nurse practitioner at the college at UVM.
Oh, yeah?
I provide gender affirming care for a lot of students. And I've been kind of terrifying myself by continuing to stay up to date on what's coming down the pike as far as legislation. And the Health and Human Services Administration is putting together a proposal to eliminate Medicaid funding entirely for gender affirming care for people under 19. But they're going further than that. They're taking a page out of the book of what they did with.
Hang on. I know their ultimate goal is commie revolution, destroying normativity, but are these kind of meetings more about them crafting and forming arguments to fight cat? No, it's all. Everything they're talking about has been discussed a million times before in a million different meetings over the course of decades. There's literally nothing new in this meeting. There's nothing new. They're just talking about the same things. They're talking about abolishing capitalism. They're talking about overthrowing capitalism. They're talking about, I mean, it's just like, I guess I don't even understand what the confusion is. I know you're asking a question in good faith, so I'm not like mad, but like, there's no new arguments. There's zero new arguments. These people have been saying exactly the same thing for decades and 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 decades.
Abortion a few years ago, where any institution that provides gender affirming care will not be eligible to receive Medicaid funding for anything, right? So that means literally no state will be able to provide gender affirming care. Right now they're talking about 19 and under, but of course this is the tip of the spear, and it means everybody else is behind that. And when I think about Megyn Kelly last week, right, in the light of the Epstein file, whatever you'd want to call it, debacle, saying, well, wait a second, you know, what are we talking about? This isn't pedophilia. The victims of Epstein's trafficking were 15, not 5. These people don't care about children, right? Exactly. But at the same time, everything that they're talking about in terms of going after trans people is under the umbrella of, you know, this is child abuse. And all the language that they use in these proposals is that those providers among us who provide gender affirming care are mutilating children. They don't give a shit. And they don't give a shit that this is going to drive trans children into suicide at younger and younger ages. And so I think about not only how do we organize when people are illegal, but how do we organize when people are told that they shouldn't exist? And I think it relates directly to the question of how do we use our unions, what kind of power we can potentially have. So my union is Staff United at UVM, and one of the first things we did when the PRISM Center changes were coming is we organized a protest outside of their luncheon during the summer. And if they really think that the students don't care that this is happening, then why did they do it in the summer, right? Exactly. The timing was really important. Yeah. And I was so proud that we had a really good showing outside of that luncheon, and it actually really put the administrators, the leadership of the Multicultural Center of Mosaic on notice, and they hated it. And they did everything they could to then silence any kind of discussion among the staff, most of whom are queer at the PRISM Center, of course, and who are terrified and outraged. And so the union's been actually meeting with those staff members on a really regular basis to talk about what it is that we can do. And for a while, it was moving towards like, we need protest, we need to ally with the students. And then people felt frightened enough that they really didn't feel that they could stick themselves out there publicly. And that's where being able to also have solidarity with students and the other unions on campus, like faculty, is super, super important. But I mean, I think your question about like, how do you take the power that we can have as unions and turn that into social power that organizes beyond the immediate issues in a contract is the $100 million question, because we have potential power as workers. We make everything run. If we don't work, the system system shuts down, our unions are not places that people necessarily see a connection between social issues and that power. And so it starts small, but it starts with really important fights, like certainly like the Prism Center, but we're holding in my union an affinity group forum in a couple, I think it's going to be 2 months from now, to talk about like building resistance or building defense of trans rights within our unions. So that's like 4 union members to come to talk concretely about what it is that we do.
The unions.
And we're going to continue to organize. One of the things I keep thinking about is like,
imagine my
healthcare
shock.
providers they're going to come after us. Like if they have already, there are all kinds of people who are facing death threats around the country. I actually know that my union has my back, and that matters. So it's about building those connections and building up that constant presence and not backing down.
I have a direct comment.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So I love UVM. A lot of the union, all the unions are great.
Okay. I don't know who the fuck you are, but you're talking a lot in my chat and you're not actually being helpful. And what you're saying is not actually relevant to what's going on. So what I need you to do is shut the fuck up, stop confusing people, because anytime you're doing this stuff, mouthing off in my chat just because you feel like it, because you don't know what's going on right now, it is not fucking helpful. Shut up and listen. This has nothing to fucking do with DEI. DEI is so far below this. If you think this has anything to do with DEI at all, you have watched way too much conservative retard content, and you need to reprogram your entire fucking brain. DEI is so far below this, it's not even funny.
Actually, compared to my other college, y'all are great. But one thing that I want to emphasize is people
that
are
doesn't
scared,
mean what you think it
individuals are
means.
Scared. Unions do protect us. They do. An injury to one is an injury to all. I'm sure we've heard that a lot. At least here in Vermont we have. That's a common trait here for some reason. But it is true. It is true. It really is. We need to protect each other. A lot of people right now are like, I need to be able to get by. I need to be okay. I'll keep my head down and I will be protected because I'm keeping my head down. That's not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I understand the fear. I have considered trying to go back in the closet. I have not. I'm over 2 years on testosterone now, and I'm happy with it, and I want to continue. But people have posed the question to me of, wouldn't you be safer if you looked less queer, if you stopped, just go back in the closet? That has been suggested to me. I have not taken that advice, but that is something concerned people. They don't mean that maliciously, though. They are concerned for my well-being. If I didn't have the support system I have, I probably would go back in the closet. But I know, at least within this community at University of Vermont, because I love the unions. I talk with so many people as well as the students. I am so grateful to be here because I can be, for the most part, who I am without having to worry about going back in the closet. But you cannot be safe as one individual. You need your community. No, and I'm not just talking about, oh, trans people have to defend together and only together. No, we need to get united across the whole campus, across the whole state, across the whole country. I don't want more people, whether you're trans or not, whether you're queer or not, whether you're a person of color or not.
People were confused earlier about why they're having meetings if they just say the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because that is what is required when you are organizing to do something as a large-scale group. You need to have a lot of meetings where you're saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Should you try to join unions? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Are you ready to fight for decades to take back the leadership of the unions that you've lost by not joining the unions in the first place? Are you ready to get involved and actually run the unions? Because these people now own the unions. They own the leadership of the unions. So if you want to get hundreds of thousands of your friends together so that you guys can go take over the unions and you're actually serious about taking over the unions and taking the leadership position in those unions, go ahead. If you are not serious about doing that, then it would be a fool's errand. It'd be a complete waste of time. You need hundreds of thousands of people, at least, and you need hundreds of thousands of people that are deadly serious about doing what is required to completely take over the union leadership. And by the way, you need to start doing that now. You need to do that. You have 2 years. You have 2 years in order to do it. Because in May 1st of 2028, these people are planning to use the unions to hold a mass general strike to shut down the economy. So 2 years to completely undo decades and decades and decades of leftist organizing around controlling the unions. Good luck.
We need to stand together. I want a world where everyone's okay, where basic necessities are met, real necessities. And I want to emphasize the point that we need each other, not individuals. We need each other and to be united.
Lots of time for questions and comments.
So, thank you everybody for the comments that you did and all of that. I think this is it's an incredibly difficult time to be talking about all this stuff, and also an incredibly important time to be talking about all this stuff. And I've told people this before, but I work in housing, and we got our annual award letter in the housing program that I'm in, and one of the stipulations was we cannot teach gender ideology. Whatever the fuck gender ideology means. That's their words, of course. There was just another thing that passed that is turning those executive orders into policy from HUD, which is how executive orders work, and that's, the frustrating part for me, other than just being a person of conscience and seeing how bigoted and disgusting all of this shit is that there wasn't enough fight back from all of the providers who were doing it. There wasn't even kind of notice. That's why I've said it a bunch of times. That's what some people have heard me say. Because there isn't that. There's a kind of going along to, if we just, we make it through the next 4 years, we should be fine. 4 years is a fucking long time for people to be experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
And any day experiencing homelessness is a long time to experience homelessness. There's studies that show all of this stuff, that the degradation of your mental health and physical health go significantly down. And the idea is just like, oh well, things will go back to normal in 4 years. They're not going to do that.
Yeah,
And it's an incredibly callous way to look at the shit. And I think, what you said, Ambrose, is touching, and it's like, we can't go back in the closet for anything.
Yeah.
Like, we're out there. We've identified ourselves, and the closet.
Oh,
is
that's a
where we
tranny.
and
Oh, that's a tranny.
that's a horrible fucking thing to say, but it's true. Like, we don't, the way that we fight this stuff is arm in arm. Like, I always think of the example of a fire hose, and like, the fire hose will knock you over. A fire hose can maybe knock 2 people over. When you start linking arms with 2, 3, 4, 5 hundreds of people, then it becomes impossible to be knocked over, and then you take the fire hose. So it's just like, their strategy is always, their strategy is apartheid. The minority rule, and the tactic is divide and conquer. And that's from when they figured out that worked up till today. They're going to be doing that until it doesn't work. And the way we fight that is together, and absolute solidarity. And we know that it's not this isn't given. This isn't something that is just at some point it does kind of come naturally, but there is also like arguments that we need to win around this, and we need to do that. But also, the other thing to think of is we're all on the chopping block. It's just the order that we're in right now. So if you can't do it for the interest of the person who you work with and who's working with you, do it for yourselves. So I don't know. I wish I could conclude it better, but
There's such strict rules that we have to follow when we work with kids, and according to the AOE and whatnot. And how do we continue to keep queer and trans kids safe in school when I have students as young as 10 and 11 on the lower end who come to school and just want to be who they are, and we want to support that, and we still have to return them to these families at the end of the day who are so steeped in this disgusting rhetoric of
Well, that's a clip, I would say. That's a clip where they're talking about trans 10 and 11-year-olds in school. Karlyn, why do we have to watch this? This is so boring. This is stupid. Why are we watching this? Oh, wait, they're talking about trans 10-year-olds in school.
according to the AOE and whatnot.
I wish I could conclude it better, but
There's such strict rules that we have to follow when we work with kids, and according to the AOE and whatnot. And how do we continue to keep queer and trans kids safe in school when I have students as young as 10 and 11 on the lower end who come to school and just want to be who they are, and we want to support that, and we still have to return them to these families at the end of the day who are so steeped in this disgusting rhetoric of you can't be who you are really doesn't exist, there's two genders and all this horse shit. And we're not even supposed to call them, when we write home, by the name that they want to be identified as, and I have to keep a list of the name I have to call them when I talk to mom and dad. And I can keep it straight to an extent, but God forbid I slip up, and what have I just done to this child? You know, this is what we struggle with. You know, how we're all doing our best, but how do we continue to show up for these babies every single day and not accidentally make their life worse?
I resonate strongly with that, and I think I don't acknowledge the space for it. We're in migrant justice's space. The people who know a good amount about what it means.
Exactly.
And undocumented folks, like if you talk to most compas who are very involved in local dignity, they have some of the strongest worker solidarity of any workers, and that's extols the virtue.
So for people who don't know how leftist meetings work, oftentimes in the Q&A section, what they do is they don't respond to every question when it's asked. Everyone goes around the room and they get to say what they want to say, and they get to make whatever statements. There's not necessarily a response from the panel, but there might be. Like, they respond to all of them kind of like collectively. And so that's why that woman, that teacher, who we don't know who that is, but the teacher talking about how, you know, gender is bullshit. That's why they didn't respond to her, because this is just how leftist meetings work.
In this case, kind of social, cultural independence. And I think it's a similar thing of like, you know, when I experienced sexual assault as a teen, I didn't seek the sources of power or my family for support. I found it in solidarity.
Hey, thank you for this. I appreciate it. Karlyn, you're the GOAT. I am placing your teaching into strategy within the Republican Party. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm trying to put together resources for people to be able to do that. Like all the clips we make, I'm building a massive website right now where all these clips are going to be categorized and available so that everyone can go and find the clips they need when they're trying to make the case for certain things. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
And the sociocultural independence of the queer movement is what has propelled it forward. We wouldn't be where we are as queer people if we didn't find the opportunity to build that solidarity in the last 20, 40, 100,000 years. And so, you know, looking forward, I guess, that's easy to say. That's a really tough situation you're in, and I think any educator or people who work with kids have that task ahead of them. But I guess that, for folks on the panel or in the room who work with individuals who are like seeking solidarity, like there's some bone in them knows that if they had an independent like place where they existed in solidarity, they wouldn't need to beg the system for scraps. They would need to beg the system for acceptance. So, fuck acceptance. Sorry. I don't know if that was a rule or
Good luck, Charlie.
The question is what is the thing that changes people from a mindset of of fear into a mindset of seeking solidarity? Because I think it's so easy to talk to somebody who's seeking solidarity and guide them into finding it with each other. But when somebody's talking from a place of fear, and children who have shown incredible solidarity, but shouldn't have to. Like, how do you? What's the thing that the magic words that you say as an organizer or as somebody who works with kids or somebody who works with students that like really clicks with people's brains in terms
General
of
Flynn has no
turning on
fucking
that
clue
light?
what's going on. I'm sorry. I'm not going to General Flynn. He has no
I can't
idea.
speak to educator because I do not work with kids, and I don't really think I could because I get impatient. But I have spoken with folks who are scared and want resources and want to be in solidarity with people, but they are scared. One thing that I've seen is supplying resources just in general, like having a list of, mental health resources, mutual aid efforts like giving food, blankets, even fundraising, little things like that makes them more likely to come into a community that will help them. I would like someone to talk about the children one, please, because I do want to hear that as I have siblings and little cousins. So.
Yep, so before I call on you, Paul, we are getting close to time, so I'm going to take a last round of hands and then we'll ask our speakers to share their final thoughts and close us out. So that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So a question around unions and workers' power. I think the discussion has been really good at establishing the inseparability of fights against oppression and exploitation, and to combat the Christian right, far right agenda that's being imposed, we have to have an alternative solution to the economic crisis.
Oh,
And that
yeah?
fundamentally depends on our ability to organize as workers in expanded infrastructures of resistance that can strike and demand an alternative.
Damn, that sounds
So I
like
just wanted
communism.
to, I know, Ambrose, I'm not sure about all of your work in this, but I know Lars is an active member of what Ashley mentioned, Vermont School Workers United. And Eric, I know you have a lot of experience working in unions. Just wondering if you'd want to, like, Lars, like to tell people about School Workers United and some of the work that you've been doing and how you're thinking about bringing these issues together. I think that would be really interesting. And,
Totally.
The question for Eric is as well.
Eric, you wanna go first?
And actually, maybe before we do, let me just see if there's any last questions and then we'll throw it back. And I did want to make two announcements before you close it out. One is Tempest is going to be holding a discussion 3 weeks from now about what is socialism from below, because people have talked a lot about what socialism is, why we need socialism.
Yeah, we missed
made
it.
reference to it, so this is a chance to really dive into what we mean by socialism. And then I also just wanted to put a plug out there for resources when it comes to providing gender-affirming care and hormones and surgery in particular. 100% agree that this should all be free. Cost should never be a barrier. That's the kind of society we're fighting for. In the here and now, right now, there are also organizations that are providing assistance, and I've compiled a list of those resources for students that I see, but if anyone's interested in those, I'm really happy to pass them on. Who wants to go first? They're both
Yeah.
pointing at you.
So, hold on one second. Okay. I just want to make sure I get my thoughts together. Okay. Paul, awesome question. I'm going to try to connect that to the two folks over here who are asking about how we deal with children and how we deal with the question of like illegality. I mean, like these are enormous questions. I think the question.
Hang on. I'm just going to clip this. We're just going to assume he's about to say
Paul,
something
I just wanna
crazy.
make sure I get my thoughts together.
Hang on.
Okay. I just want to make sure I get
Got
my
it.
thoughts together. Okay. Paul, awesome question. I'm going to try to connect that to the two folks over here who are asking about how we deal with children and how we deal with the question of like illegality. I mean, like these are enormous questions. I think that when we're thinking about the role of organized labor, it's also right how we find the people within our unions who we are in what are affinity groups with, we're in shared practicing space with, and we're sort of meeting out the concrete day-to-day, how do we reduce the harm as much as possible. That's kind of one register. The other register is a more outward one. And I think it's about who is our audience? Who are we talking to? I'm not trying to convince Elon Musk. I'm not trying to convince Donald Trump, but my audience is other working people who may be confused, who I may disagree with today. Tomorrow, I hope I agree with them. But I think that the thing to say is people have very real grievances. Healthcare and education are two of those sites. I think often, anecdote, we all remember the murder of Brian Thompson, right? This is a month after Trump's reelection. The response, bipartisan approval, right? On both sides of the spectrum, celebration, maybe celebration is a strong word, but at least a sort of empathy for the rationale right behind the murder of the CEO of United Healthcare. We have to ask how that kind of anger towards the healthcare system could coexist at the same time that there is a popular campaign to strip a small minority of people of healthcare altogether. And I think the way we do that is by methodically going through, understanding and unpacking for our audience how healthcare got this shitty in the first place. The same thing is true for education. To me, it makes sense that education and healthcare are two of the places where anti-trans sentiment has gained the most traction because these are places that have been the most destabilized by disinvestment over 40 years. So unpacking that for our audience within our unions, particularly those of us who work in healthcare, those of us who work in education, that's the outward projection. The inward work is finding the people within our organizing spaces who already disagree, who already agree with us, so that we can work together to minimize the harm. Two other just kind of quick things. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Jules Gill Peterson has a new book coming out. It's called, I cannot wait. It's called something to the effect of like refusing the liberal transgender, refusing something to that effect. And I guarantee she's going to go through that argument. But one of the things that I think Gill Peterson would probably say is, well, we've always existed. And you brought up Leslie Feinberg and Leslie Feinberg's Stone Butch Blues, which is making
All right, that clip wasn't all that I hoped it would be, so I'm just going to discard that. But the reason I was happy about Jules Gill Peterson getting a mention is like, Jules Gill Peterson is a trans Marxist professor at Johns Hopkins University. I've seen Jules Gill Peterson in person at the Socialism Conference. Like, Jules Gill Peterson is a trip. So the fact that this person is quoting Jules Gill Peterson is like, yeah, duh, obviously.
Visible the union labor work that what we would consider transmasculine today, they didn't use the language at the time, but transmasculine individuals during the Vietnam War, gender has always been shaped by labor, right? That it was possible for a group of masculine women, again, who we might read as trans-mass today, to make livings to provide for their queer families within a sort of an upstate New York factory culture that existed because of a war culture. So I think that we always have to remember that we'll continue to exist in some way, and sort of the sort of contours of that are going to get slimmer, right? and that's what we've got to push back against. The final thing that I want to say is I want to share anecdotally. Y'all have been talking about this multidiscipline, multicultural center. I could do you one better, okay? The institution that I'm affiliated with renamed our area studies, conglomerated them, and renamed them Critical Inquiry. That is devoid of anything. Critical inquiry. Simultaneous then went on a campaign to quote unquote study these programs to figure out which ones would be on the chopping block. So I mean, they're giving the evidence to us, right? Which is it's very clear that yes, I want to sort of reemphasize something that I ended with. We absolutely have to attend to and uplift the specific violences that trans folks are experiencing, and also to name that like no one trans person has the same violent experiences. But we have to simultaneously do that while making the linkages between the attacks on social provisioning and this quest to restore profitability, which is not going to work, guys. It's just going to be terrible for them and for us. So I'll stop there.
Thanks. Who's next?
Oh, it's okay.
I spoke a lot.
I like how you all volunteer each other.
Well, the very nature of having someone come to a realization is like the quest of my role. Like that's all I think about as an educator. And so how then do we get people to buy in, right? That is deep. That is deep shadow work for an individual to like really come to the precipice of being able to like surrender to the greater cause, right? Which is why we have to protect, like we're at risk of perpetuating this through the generations, right? As again, we see things like public school hacked apart. So I think the teachers union has gone wrong in their abandonment of the rank and file.
Yep.
Period. The Vermont Teachers Association abandoned their rank and file. Don Tenney, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, you know.
They don't listen to us, and the local control is what is going to allow us to keep trans teachers in the classroom, and it is the thing that has made us see each other as disjointed from one another.
Totally right.
The Vermont Teachers Union is 13,000 members strong and doesn't move as a collective. And it again is this like neoliberal perspective of refraining from imposing a sort of ideological narrative onto their laborers, right? And how naive to think that we are not then being conditioned by other rhetoric. Like, what is this, a vacuum? No, it's planet Earth. Like, this is where I think Vermont School Workers United is like rallying at the moment. Is we're like, hey, Vermont NEA, you abandoned your rank and file. Here's what we're going to do about it.
Yep.
And so, you know, there's a lot of arguments about what the most effective campaigns are therein in terms of whipping up the rank and file. That's like, I really don't think the question is like how, okay, it is how do we get people on board, but it's not like, do they want to? We want to. Like, we are human beings. We want to do this. Like, we do. We are working against a conditioning that is so fucking rampant. I mean, you cannot, like, it is so hard to deprogram yourself and pull away from this propaganda, right? So it is returning the voice to the rank and file. Like that is where we have to go. And I think this has been done well by other locals in the healthcare sector. And, you know, that's another thing Vermont School Workers United is looking to do, is build more crosstalk, because the largest expenditure in public education is, guess what?
Healthcare.
There we go. So, this is where we have to go. It is not pushing decisions or like guiding legislative decisions with the Vermont NEA Executive Board. It's with the rank and file. Yeah, they need to be bringing forth.
Stunning and brave. Stunning and brave.
I'm gonna be honest, I cannot speak about unions because I'm not in a union. I talk a lot with union members, and I have a lot of family members who think unions are a waste of time and we don't need them anymore, which is, I do disagree. I know that unions protect your healthcare, your wages. They do a lot for you. I mean, I know an individual who said, well, educational unions like School Workers United make sense, but they should only be allowed to strike during the summer. I don't think that would be effective. I don't think that would be effective. So I can't really speak to what Paul asked. But I do know on the student end, we do look towards the campus unions. We do, because we know, for example, last spring, the unions rallied to support our immigrant and people of color communities, as well as our queer communities on campus, for graduate students, undergraduate students, faculty and staff. They did that, and students are so thankful for that, because we do need the unions. Even if we are not in the unions, y'all are protecting the school right now, and I am so thankful for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's it.
I think we're actually going to go chat some more.
I guess that's it. Well, we did get some good clips today. It wasn't actually as crazy as I thought it was going to be, but we did definitely get some good clips today, to include the one of the teacher talking about trans 10 and 11-year-olds and hiding that information from the parents. But it's Vermont, so no one should be surprised, because I told people Vermont school districts were doing this about 3 years ago, and then no one ever did nothing about it. So I guess that's it. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like pretty accurate. What scares me in trying to reveal these commie meetings to boomers is boomers denying it. Yeah, I actually do agree with that. I mean, I think that's like, that is like, I mean, it's like, there were so many people here today. Like, there were so many, and listen, I say this a million times. And thank you, Ray, on Rumble for the $2 Rumble rant. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. I say this all the time, but like, it is exhausting how little people on the right actually care about it. What you need to do is learn as much as you possibly can, and when you learn enough, you will know what to do. The question is, why can't you sit and learn about your enemy? This is the actual question, Peter. I'm going to be very, very blunt. The actual question is, why don't you people ever bother to sit the fuck down, shut the fuck up, and educate yourselves about the enemy that you claim to want to fight? Do you want to know why conservatives get shit wrong over and 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 over again, always and perpetually? Because you don't fucking listen. Because you don't sit down and learn. Because you always want to go do something, except you don't want to educate yourself to know what the thing to do actually is. And that's why you go out and you do a whole bunch of shit and none of it fucking works. Because you didn't bother to sit down, shut the fuck up, and learn about your enemy. If you want to do something, learn. Learn as much as you can. Learn how to speak their language fluently. Sit through their presentations. Break down their language. Learn to speak their language. Until you do that, there is nothing that you can do. Because you will fuck everything up. Because you do not understand the language and you do not understand the enemy. Because you didn't bother to study. Yeah, conservatives basically wander around aimlessly like chickens with their head cut off, and they complain and whine anytime you ask them to do anything, and then they have massive hissy fit meltdowns. Bro, they're not using you are one of the people that needs to learn the language. They are not using affinity group like you mean it. You think about it in a DEI sense. They are not saying it in a DEI sense. It is completely different. I am leaving today with a massive headache. I've had a headache for about the last hour now. And the reason I have a headache is I'm so fucking sick of conservative retards coming and fucking up my streams. I am so sick of it. I am so sick of it. It is exhausting. It is exhausting. It is exhausting for conservative retards to just completely try to take over every single fucking stream with their fucking idiocy. DEI doesn't fucking matter. The only reason you think DEI matters is because of conservative retards who don't understand what the fuck they're talking about. And by the way, no, that bridge thing is a company. That bridge thing is not the fucking rebrand of DEI. That is a company. It is a fucking platform. You guys didn't even bother to... Jesus fucking Christ. I'm gonna go cry now. I'm gonna go cry. I'm gonna go cry. Hey, thanks, Malcolm. I appreciate that. I'll be back tomorrow. Actually, we have a special stream tomorrow. Hang on. Hang on. We have a special stream tomorrow. There will be a stream tomorrow. There will be a stream tomorrow starting at 12:30. It more in earnest starts at 1. Why is it doing this? And we are going to be watching a live communist presentation that starts live streaming at 1 p.m. And Sophie Lewis is going to be in it. And it's called Feminism Against Cisness. And it's going to be awesome. And so we're going to watch that tomorrow. And that I'm going to start the stream at like 12:30 Eastern time. And the actual presentation is going to start at 1. And Lord help any conservative retard that does not follow the explicit instructions that I give them when we do this stream, because I will be giving out explicit instructions to include no shit posting in their live chat, to include no disruption, to include no asking questions unless I tell you to ask a fucking question. Like, there will be rules, and anyone who does not follow the rules tomorrow will get banned in my chat. And so if you don't like my rules, that's fine, but you don't get to participate in my classroom if you don't respect the rules that I'm going to lay out to you tomorrow when we do this. So, because there's a reason that I ask people to do things the way I do. I appreciate what you do, Karlyn. Everything you do is quite an education. Thank you. Without you, no one else would be talking about any of this. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Without me, no one will be talking about half this stuff. Yep. Mm-hmm. So fucked up, man. So fucked up. So fucked up. All right, I'm gonna go cry now. I hope you all have a good rest of your night. I'll see you tomorrow. Where's my outro video? There it is.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here? 3 months, May 17th. And what brought you here? That's difficult to I am not completely like other people. People dislike me because I am not completely like them.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.